I will call to order the meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for December 21st, 2016. We will rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Zachary, do we have any changes? Oh, roll call, please. Here.
Vice Chair Clark.
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
Commissioner Cavazos. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. Commissioner Martinez-Cohen.
Here.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda for today? Okay, then we'll move on. Written communications? No? Public comment. Any member of the public may address the Commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the Commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the Commission. I do not have any speaker slips, and I don't see anyone for public comment, so we will close that. And it brings us to our Youth Council report, and we have Jensen Steady joining us today to bring us up to date on Youth Council. Welcome.
Hi. So my name is Jensen Steady, and I'm the treasurer for the Youth Council. So we have a lot of things going on as we close out 2016. We have a new Youth Council member, Michelle Chin from Dos Pueblos. Unfortunately, we still have 4 vacancies, so we're hopeful that we either get a special recruitment or we will fill these vacancies recruiting in May. We applied and got a second interview for a Youth Making Change grant. We were working with Can Do, and we created a group called Adolescent Leaders Modeling Acceptance, ALMA, and this is to help with undocumented immigrants, and we're going to have workshops and stuff here in Santa Barbara. We're also working with the Auto Club and are hosting a Dare to Prepare event on February 7th. We're working with AHA and are planning and co-hosting a Peace Builders Conference, which is on January 22nd. We're working with the Davis Center staff and are co-hosting a Seniors Winter Ball on January 14th, which is where we're going to be honoring seniors and be assisting with dinner and dance. We're going to have a mini leadership training workshop prior to our meeting, our Youth Council meeting on January 9th. And lastly, I'm very proud we got KUIT to come. We've had events such as we had a speak out, or like a town hall kind of thing on the Adult Use Marijuana Act, and we had a meet and greet with the police chief, and we had KUIT there, and we got a lot of news coverage. And both events were very successful, so we wanted to let you guys know. And that is all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And we'd love to maybe see some of the pictures from the event in January, the Seniors Ball.
Okay, yeah,
that'd be
sure.
cool.
I can get those.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Commissioner Committee Assignment Reports. Why don't we start with our Commissioner Committee Assignment Reports with Andrea. Yeah.
Thank you. I attended the Creeks Advisory Committee meeting this month, and they did an update on their 6-year capital improvement plan, where they went over finances and budget and status on which projects are being completed and which ones are going to be for 2017 and 2018. Additionally, they had a little holiday party, which was very nice. It was my first time having a holiday party with them. I didn't expect it. They had a really nice cheese and bread and kind of caught me off guard. And then I have not been able to attend yet one of the arts and crafts meetings, but I have been following the minutes, and I know that we have an item that's going to be on the agenda today regarding that, so we'll hear more about that then.
Thank you.
I had the pleasure of attending on November 21st the Montecitos Bank and Trust Community Dividends Award luncheon, where I accepted a certificate and contribution for that was given to Park Foundation. Montecito Bank and Trust distributes about $1 million each year to various nonprofits, and we were pleased to receive that contribution. I attended the regular Street Tree Advisory Committee meeting on December 1st. Mr. Downey updated on enforcement cases. There's one case that's about to close and one case on maintenance until April, so it looks pretty good for enforcement cases. Mr. Downey also spoke about the large project on Modoc and Las Positas for the multi-purpose pathway that will be coming before various boards and commissions. And we reviewed and made site visits to the tree items on your agenda today. On the 14th, I attended the Park Foundation meeting. We discussed strategies for upcoming fundraising for Cabrillo Arts Pavilion and Bathhouse. And Park has voted to support this project through community fundraising efforts. So that's what we're working on now. Also on the 14th, I attended the Golf Advisory Committee meeting. The October aerification of the greens contributed to a round shortfall in November, but staff reported that the balloon sale of merchandise was very successful. And the Nine and Dine program, the momentum is building for that program. And unfortunately and fortunately in November, with a full sheet of tea times right after Thanksgiving, the rains came and cancellations were in full force. So they lost a lot of rounds due to the rain, but we're all very thankful for the rain. So management is optimistic for December and confident that they will meet the bottom line despite some setbacks. And they also reported that they're getting new customers from emails who are enjoying the specials. There are weekly emails that are coming out for the specials at the golf course. And finally, the Golf Advisory Committee approved the Players Improvement Fund projects recommended by the Players Improvement Fund Subcommittee. That's it.
Thank you. Ms. Clark.
I also attended the Park Foundation board meeting on November 14th and don't have anything additional to report other than what Leslie did.
Mr. Lesnar Buxton.
I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Committee in both November and December. November, we had a presentation from the Chief of Police, and in December, we looked at the Capital Improvement Project, which we look at later today. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also attended that Neighborhood Advisory Council meeting. So that concludes our assignment reports and brings us to commission and staff communications.
Chair Longstreet and members of the commission, this is slightly out of the ordinary, but I did want to welcome Rose Navarez, who's our new executive assistant for Parks and Recreation. She's assisted this evening by Terry Yamada for your meeting, but you will see Rose in January as well.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to Parks and Rec. The other thing I just would mention at this point is that we will have 2 new commissioners, one in January, and Ms. Wiscombe has been appointed we want to congratulate her. She's been appointed to the Planning Commission, but she will stay with us through the next recruitment. So thank you very much. That is doubling your workload, or maybe tripling it with planning, but thank you for doing that. So we're happy to have her stay with us. Ceremonial items.
Chair Longstreet and members of the commission, we have one of our department employees who happens to be here tonight, Jason Bryan, who was recognized by the City Council this month for 25 years of service to the city. And I believe every single one of those 25 years has been with Parks and Recreation. So Jason brings a breadth and depth of experience to the department in a variety of programs. You most often see him at the Carrillo Recreation Center, but he has a variety of duties and responsibilities, and so we're happy to recognize his years of service.
Thank you, Jason. Do you want to say a word or two? No, you're fine? Okay, but thank you for all your work over the last 25 years. We congratulate you.
Ditto.
Yeah. That is a good thing to hear. Now we come to our consent items, and we have minutes from the October 26th meeting.
I move that we accept the minutes from the October 26, 2016 meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or any corrections? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we've passed that unanimously. And that brings us to Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Mr. Downey.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, item 3A1 is 831 San Pascual Street. And there are two scrub cherry trees that are directly adjacent to the driveway approach for two driveways. The intersection adjacent to this is extremely active with bus traffic, pedestrian traffic. It's an entrance into the neighborhood. The applicant is requesting to remove the tree because they have a really hard time pulling in and out of the driveway with those trees there, and they're the fruit that drops from the trees creates pedestrian issues. So they're requesting to remove the tree primarily for safety reasons, for the visibility of oncoming traffic. The committee reviewed the item and determined that there is a visibility issue, and they recommend that the commission approve the trees on the condition the applicant replace with two street trees at adjacent property owners, in front of adjacent property owners that are much needed in the area.
Are there questions? And just to make an announcement for the people in the room, if you want to speak to an item, there are speaker slips over there, and please turn them in. But we have no speaker slips for this item. Questions from the commission? Okay. Make a motion.
Okay, I will move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee and approve the removal of both street trees on the condition that the applicant plants two replacement street trees at locations fronting adjacent property, and the code cited would be safety dictates removal.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. And that brings us to A2.
Bear with me, I hit the escape button.
That's okay, we've got a Ms. Tremaine? You want this one, okay.
Chair Wiscombe Commissioners, at Cabrillo Ballpark, Parks and Recreation is proposing a project to improve the experience at the park and usability. The project is scheduled to expand the pathways around the park and add some equipment for exercise to expand the use of that park. Many of the improvements necessitate the removal of the trees, and I'll go through each one. I'll show each tree as we go. The coluretarias along Calle Puerto Vallarta, some are in the current walkway, and some are adjacent to the sidewalk in the park area. They're all in poor condition. The expansion of the walking path will create a 8-foot wide path that bicycles and joggers can use jointly. The trees and the tree wells are in the way of that. All of them are in poor condition. Here's a couple of more. This is not the fact that they're losing leaves because they're deciduous. They are deciduous, but this is their condition year round. And the last one here in the left photo is the last of the coluretarias being proposed for removal. In addition to that, in the section near the end of the chromatic gate, there will be some exercise equipment in that area as well being proposed. And the proposal is to change the grading area of this eucalyptus tree to create a play mound and address some flooding issues. The grade changes, along with the poor condition of the tree, are reasons proposed for the removal of this tree. This pine tree is located along South Milpas. It is not consistent with the other pine trees in the park, and the location blocks views into the park from Milpas, so it's being proposed for removal. In addition, the walkway is going to extend adjacent to the tree closer, which would require some root pruning. This Canary Island date palm in the left photo is proposed for removal as well. And as you'll hear later in the report, staff is recommending replacement trees that are a different kind. The photo on the right tries to demonstrate that. The tree in the foreground in the photo on the right is the Phoenix dactylifera, which is the species that staff would support planting. Directly behind it, and it's a little hard to see, is another Canary Island date palm. This photo is there to show how close they resemble each other. So I'll just point real quick here. So this is the Phoenix dactylifera. This is the Phoenix canariensis. So as you can see, they have very similar leaf structure. The trunks are similar. The dactylifera does have a little bit smaller trunk than the canariensis, but again, they do look very similar. And as I'll mention in a little bit, the dactylifera is much more disease resistant. At the corner of Milpas and Cabrillo, this Mexican fan palm is proposed for removal for the installation of an entrance plaza at that location that this is in the way of. The committee is recommending that all trees be approved for removal except the Phoenix canariensis, on the condition that 6 Mexican fan palms be planted along Cabrillo Boulevard in these locations, and up to 2 Canary Island date palms be planted near the existing Canary Island date palm. Staff supports the recommendation for removals and has considered the placement of the Canary Island date palm and alterations that Mr. Van Mullen will go over to retain that tree. Staff does not support planting of the 6 Mexican fan palms for reasons that also Mr. Van Mullen will go into, and doesn't support planting of the Canary Island date palms. Staff recommends the planting of the Phoenix dactylifera because the Phoenix canariensis is susceptible to a disease that is becoming more prevalent in the area and shortens the life of those trees. And the dactylifera is not susceptible to that disease and looks similar. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Justin Van Mullen. We'll talk about the recommendation as it deals with the project.
Hello, my name is Justin Van Mullen. I am the associate planner for the project. So in this slide, you'll see that staff reviewed the committee's recommendations to install the 6 new Mexican fan palms within the Cabrillo Boulevard Parkway and studied possible locations at the bottom. After careful consideration, staff determined that the proposed palms would detract from the unique structure of the wind-blown Monterey cypress and other conifers and diminish ocean views from within the park. Next slide. Staff does support the committee's recommendation to retain the Canary Island date palms with adjusting and will adjust the landscape plan accordingly. The Canary Island date palm is seen in yellow. However, staff recommends that the commission limit the condition to planting up to 2 new Phoenix dactylifera date palms. As discussed previously, this species of date palm looks very similar to the Canary Island date palm, but is much less susceptible to disease. In addition to the 2 new date palms, the project already includes 12 new trees and will increase the total number of trees in the park from 37 to 40. I'll be available for any questions.
So just to wrap things up, the committee's recommendation is to approve the removal of all trees except for the Canary Island date palm on the condition that 6 Mexican fan palms be placed along Cabrillo Boulevard and up to 2 Canary Island date palms be planted in an area of the existing Canary Island date palm. Staff's recommendation is that we concur with staff's recommendations on removals. We recommend that 2 Phoenix dactyliferas be planted in lieu of the Canary Island palms, and recommend not installing the 6 Mexican fan palms.
Okay. Questions? Yeah, we do have public comment, but we'll do our committee questions first.
Okay. First of all, well, some of this is new, but I have a couple questions. Is there so we looked at, Stack recommended 6 Mexican fan palms. Did you look at 5 or 4? Is there a compromise that can be made? Because the intent was to mirror what was across the street. So have you looked at a different number other than 6? Because I saw your diagram up there, Mr. Van Mullen, of the location of the proposed location, or where you thought you might be able to place the Mexican fan palm.
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Wiscombe, we did look at possible proposals to move the palms, and one of the things that was a compromise was trying to put some of the palms more behind that entry plaza and kind of grouping them in that location. And so we have looked at that, and that is our plan, is to have some more Mexican fan palms in that location. That allows the spacing for the existing conifers and the Monterey cypress.
But what I was asking was along Cabrillo, where Stack wanted some additional Mexican fan palms placed, and they picked the number of 6. And I'm asking you, did you consider 4 or 3 or 5, or was there an appropriate number that might be a compromise with Stack's recommendation and staff's recommendation not to plan any?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Wiscombe, what we looked at was trying to make sure that the presence of the structure, the unique structure of the wind-blown trees, wasn't taken away by these palms, and so having appropriate spacing, trying to get the palms more to the east at the corner. That's what we looked at, because even placing a few palms kind of within, like, say, 3 or 2, it's still, we felt, detracted from the structure, that wind-blown, unique structure of those trees, which you don't see much along this boulevard.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Wiscombe, in addition to that, we have some extra slides. In the slide, you see some palm-type trees shown in the area of the proposed dactyliferous. We're planning to readjust the locations of these proposed palms. We feel that the location in the interior of the park is more suitable than along Cabrillo Boulevard. One of the things that we heard from other commissions, HLC specifically, commented that they liked the openness and the way you can see in and out of this park from Cabrillo Boulevard. So staff is supporting that viewpoint as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, could I just finish with my questions first? Okay, I kind of understand that, but you're talking about pretty tall, skinny palm. So I'm
we're getting into comments now. So.
No, let me go on and ask my next question, please. I have one more question. The structure of the Dactylifera looks quite different from the Phoenix canariensis. It looks like it's taller and skinnier. Is that correct? Does it grow taller and skinnier?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Wiscombe, the height of the tree is very similar to the Canary Island.
Okay.
The trunk, as I mentioned earlier, is slightly more slender than the Phoenix canariensis.
So it's not stout like the Phoenix canariensis?
Not as stout.
Not as stout. Okay.
It is more stout than Mexican fan palms, though.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my question. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, go on.
I was curious why the stack was sort of dedicated to seeing those palms on Cabrillo. Is there? What I was just curious about the discussion. I thought maybe.
Well, we do have a couple of speakers that may give us some insight into that. Really quick question. Go for it.
When you talked about reorienting the date palms, you're being aware of the safety concerns and not wanting to put a group of trees in a cluster, right?
That is correct, Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Clark. We are still trying to space those trees out appropriately so there's not going to be a creation of some type of hiding spot.
Beautiful, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we have two public speakers, and you'll have 2 minutes each. Maury Tremaine, come on.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. First, to address what we've been discussing lately, which is the Washingtonia palms along Cabrillo. Personally, my view is that those Washingtonias will repeat or correlate to the Washingtonias on the other side of Cabrillo Boulevard. So we, as a committee, had thought that that would be a nice pairing, and the repetition of them on the park side. Their trunks are relatively narrow, and I don't see that as impeding ocean views from the park. Regarding the date palm, personally, I don't think that the Dactylifera Phoenix compares at all to the canariensis, which is the date palm that we don't want removed. The Phoenix canariensis trunk is much more sturdy, broad in caliper, much more stately. The canopy is a dark green, not the gray green that Dactylifera is, and it's much denser and usually broader as well. The fusarium wilt that is an issue with some of our palms around Santa Barbara and other places is transmitted via improperly cleaned pruning instruments, meaning that if your instruments are cleaned before you go from one tree to another, then you don't pass on the disease. But the only way to prevent fusarium wilt is by prevention. So purchasing the new trees, canariensis trees, for this area would have to be, when you purchase them, they're guaranteed not to have fusarium wilt. And then if maintenance is provided properly, they wouldn't get fusarium wilt. At least that's my understanding from my research.
Okay. My timer's done, as you can tell. Now I'm going to figure out how to turn it off. Okay.
The reason that the committee decided that we were recommending two or two more of the Phoenix canariensis was because of this repetition. There are 3 down by the Chromatic Gate, and there are 2 across the street at the entrance to the Santa Barbara Inn. And providing 3 here establishes an entrance, a repetition of what already exists, and a solid entrance.
Okay, thank you. You need
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Mr. Cunningham will continue this.
Hi, Bob Cunningham. I agree with everything Maury said, and I won't repeat it. I'll try not to, at least. In terms of the view from the park with regard to the Mexican fan palms, the park is kind of an inwardly focused activity area. People are there for sports, using the recreational equipment. Excuse me, I don't consider the view from the park of the ocean so critical that we can't plant a few Mexican fan palms along that corridor. Maybe we don't need 6. I think those of us on the committee felt that this is an opportunity to enhance the corridor of Mexican fan palms that starts pretty much at the Arts Pavilion and runs all the way to Stearns Wharf. We have a little bit of a gap here on the north side of the street, and this is a great opportunity for supplementing that corridor of Mexican fan palms. With regard to the Phoenix dactylifera versus Phoenix canariensis, I agree that the fusarium is an issue with the canariensis, but I think Maria explained that with proper purchasing and proper maintenance, we should be fairly secure with the canariensis. I also agree with Maury that the trunk structure on the canariensis is about like this. The dactylifera is more like this. It actually is quite close to the thickness of a Mexican fan palm in the lower portions of the Mexican fan palm's trunk. I think, yes, it's a Phoenix palm, and it's fairly close to the canariensis, but it's not really comparable. And I think trying to pretend that it works as a balance at the entrance to Milpas Street is a stretch. Am I done?
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope so.
I think I covered everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we'll bring this back to the commission for more questions or comments. Yes.
Chair Longstreet and commissioners, just a little bit of added information that went into the staff's evaluation of the stack recommendation besides our perspective of how that part of the park appears and the conifers that are there related to the addition of the 6 trees. And then going more to the species here, part of, as we've said to you in the past, our goal with this project is to make it to keep it open. The purpose of the project is for recreation enhancements. Clearly, we always need to look at ways to enhance the tree canopy and expand the tree canopy. In this location, it's one of those places where we're balancing multiple objectives. And then lastly, as you know, some of the funding for the project was eliminated with the last budget cycle. And so now we're currently facing about a $200,000 shortfall even to build the project as it's currently designed. So one of the things we're looking at is how to raise more, how to identify more funding, but if and when we had to change the project objectives due to funding shortfalls, where we would go and what we would do to still have some sort of project there. We haven't made that decision yet because clearly we want to fully fund the project, but we're weighing all of those issues as we look forward. And then lastly, planting trees, because it is public land and it is public park land, it wouldn't preclude us from doing that in the future. So that's another thing for the commission to consider. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Ms. Wiscombe?
Are we doing comments?
Comments? Yes.
No one else has questions?
No.
Well, it's difficult. I understand the budget concerns here, but I think I think we have a real opportunity, as Bob Cunningham stated, and to kind of close a gap here. And I'm certainly not married to the number 6, but I think making an intent to start that process, maybe it starts with 3, and then maybe we get funding from, Santa Barbara Beautiful or another organization when the drought ends to perhaps, plant 3 more Mexican fan palms along Cabrillo. I think it makes perfect sense from a design standpoint. I think that makes it a nice corridor. I don't feel like that tree is a safety issue, and I'm a landscape architect who did public work, and safety was the number one concern, and that's not a tree that I look at and go, uh-oh, we have a problem here. So I support just as a compromise, knowing that we have a budget constraint here. And I also was definitely swayed. I don't know the dactylifera really at all, so I couldn't comment, but I'm definitely swayed by the arguments that Mr. Treeman made about and Bob Cunningham made about the about using the Phoenix canariensis. So, and I do think that again is it's a punctuation of the two corners from a design standpoint of the site, and that was, I think, the intent. That's a beautiful tree. If you stand under it, it's absolutely gorgeous. But it is a punctuation, and it's a design element that I think could stand on its own without another design feature, which I think was the hurricane tree or whatever. I think the stature of the Phoenix canariensis at that corner, by adding two more, is important. So I'm in favor of mostly supporting Stack's recommendation to remove all the trees except the Canary Island date palm, and on the condition that we plant 3 Washingtonia robustas along Cabrillo Boulevard and an additional 2 Canary Island date palms at that corner. So that would be
other
my
comments. Well, I'm going to look at this from a neighborhood perspective, because I've been involved in this project long time. Eastside asked for it many years ago, and I do not want to see anything hold it up. Not making Cabrillo Boulevard special. It's that project that I'm looking at. So I believe we can plant palms another time. We can see how it goes, but I would hate to tie up this project in funding or whatever to and change a design that we theoretically approved months ago when we did our site visit. So I would tend to not want to add trees to it at this point and go along with staff. Sorry. Yeah, you can.
Okay, my only comment to that is I think there's an opportunity here to even reach out for grant funding. I know that organizations like Santa Barbara Beautiful are, would like to probably be involved and have indicated they'd like to be involved in a project like this. So getting the funding for the additional trees probably would be a real possibility.
I'm sure it would be, and I'm sure we could add them when that became appropriate when the project goes forward.
Yeah, I would just like to comment that I think, I live very near that area, and I jog there pretty much every day. I think it looks great the way it is, to be honest, and I think any enhancements that this project will make are only going to make it look better. And I would concur with staff recommendation on this, especially due to the budgetary constraints.
Other comments? Ms. Clark?
I also agree with Bibi that I don't want to see this project held up anymore, and I think that as hard as it was to keep a straight face when you were talking, Mr. Van Allen, about the windswept trees, they're perfect just the way they are, and I think that additional trees along Cabrillo might diminish that effect. So I'd like to can I make a motion?
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything?
No.
Okay.
I don't know if I can get it right, but I would like to make a motion to concur with staff recommendation on the removals, but agree with the staff recommendation on planting 2 Phoenix dactylifera in lieu of the Canary Island, planting the 2 Phoenix dactylifera with hopes in the future that we would have an opportunity to plant more trees. I agree with Stack on the removals and staff on the replacements.
Okay.
I would like to second that motion.
Okay, now we're open for discussion. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. That passes 4-1. And that brings us to item B, excuse me, 308 Argonne Circle.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, at 308 Argonne Circle, there are two moderately mature olive trees in the front setback. The one on the right is closest to the home. It is severely affected by disease and in severe decline. The one on the left is also showing signs of decline. The committee reviewed the trees and determined that through a little pruning and maintenance, the one on the left, farthest from the home, could be preserved for quite a while longer. Their recommendation is to approve the removal of the tree closest to the home and deny the removal of the tree farthest from the home on the condition that the applicant replace the one removal with a tree that can achieve the same potential stature as the olive trees can achieve.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions of staff? The applicant requested fruit trees. Can they do that with a fruit tree? Will it achieve equal stature? I think they said olive trees. I thought they said they requested
Chair Longstreet, they did indicate that they would plant olives.
I thought they said.
And they proposed some fruit trees as well.
Yeah. Okay. Any comments? Yeah, just on their letter, it said citrus or Hass avocado in the letter they sent in. Do I hear a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion. I move that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee and recommend removal of the olive closest to the home and deny the removal of the olive closest to the street on the condition that the applicant replace with a tree that can attain equal stature. And I think, yeah.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Item C, the change to the street tree master plan.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, at your October meeting, the Commission approved the removal of 6 street trees at a project along Island View Drive. The designated tree for Island View Drive is currently lemon bottlebrush tree. The committee determined that the parkway sizes could support trees with larger canopies and asked to review the designation. After discussing 14 different species, they determined that the species that would best fit Island View Drive is the Santa Cruz Island ironwood. It is native to Santa Cruz Island, and they felt that it was very fitting and similar. When the bottle brush is looking good, similar color, but would have more canopy than the lemon bottle brush would have. So their recommendation is to co-designate the Santa Cruz ironwood.
Okay. Questions? Motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion that we agree with the Street Tree Advisory Committee and co-designate Lionothamnus floribundus, Santa Cruz Island ironwood for the 600 block of Island View Drive.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, and that brings us to item 4, Director's Report.
Chair Longstreet, members of the Commission, in light of the fact that you have quite an agenda today, elected to give you just a little report, some of which has already been reported to you. The City Council did reappoint Commissioner Clark and Commissioner Martinez-Cohen to the Commission for 4-year terms, and we will have a new commissioner, Tara Armbruster, who will join us in January. And as Chair Longstreet indicated, we have Commissioner Wiscombe with us for 6 months, so we're very appreciative of that before we have another recruitment. Also, as you've heard in the past, every year we apply for community development block grants, and this year we applied for 2 programs that we operate through our Neighborhood and Outreach Services program. We do that every year, and we've been fortunate to get funding every year. Not always all the funding we ask for, but we can always scale our programs down. So those got submitted last week, and over the next couple of months we'll find out whether they're awarded. We also submitted an application to support the new playground at Municipal Tennis. As you may recall, we did that last year. Only a portion of the project was funded. In the presentation about CIP, you'll see we have a full funding request for next year in general fund. We should find out about these in advance of full consideration of the CIP, so we'll be able to make adjustments there. And since those pedestrian improvements are going in, we hope that the project will be favorably considered this year. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, as you see for the tentative commission items, we are working on doing an update to our drought response plan, and really want to come back to the commission and share with you what we've done, what we're still working on, and what we see coming forward. So you'll get that next month. And we are working on the Franceschi House options for council consideration. Hopefully we'll have that for the commission in January. And also, every so often we update you on where we are with our playgrounds, and I think that's something that will be helpful to new commissioners, and then the newest one that comes next month. So that pretty much concludes an update. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. And we may schedule a tour when
Thank
we
you,
have
Chair
our new
Longstreet. Yes, once we have
on.
our commission fully up and running in the new year.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, this brings us to item who I see more people in our audience, and I'd like to just briefly introduce the fact that today this is not an action item, the next item on our agenda about park safety, but it is an item that we need to begin to discuss. We've had many incidents happen. We've heard from the public. And it's just time for us as a commission to start this public discussion on how we handle the activities that are going on in our parks. Personally, it came to me through having young grandchildren now and being in our parks a lot more than I ever was before I had grandchildren. And seeing activities happening near our playgrounds that are not what we want our small children exposed to. And also, some of the publicity that's been in the media about activities in places like Ortega Park. So we will be continuing this item to January to have a further discussion and have more public input. But we do need to start to be aware of how we fit into the whole city structure on the safety in our parks. Thank you.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I'm going to share this presentation with Rich Hanna, who's our Assistant Director, and then I'd also like to acknowledge that Lieutenant Ed Olson is here, and he's going to speak as part of the presentation as well. So to begin, this is a topic that the Commission has asked us to bring forward for a number of months, and we are here today. It's an opportunity to sort of review the challenges that we have and what we've tried to do so far, and look at ways in which we can come up with alternative solutions. So with today's presentation, a little bit of background, talk about who we are and why we're here. That's the department, what the issues we're facing and the resource impacts, the strategies that we've implemented, the Commission's heard over the years, some of our longer-term commissioners, what we've done. We've got financial impacts. We've spent some time really trying to quantify them. We haven't got them all quantified. Just want to talk about that. And then also, with the Lieutenant's participation, talk about the partnership that we have with the Police Department to begin trying to tackle these issues. We look forward to the Commission's questions, comments. If there's more information that you would like that we could then bring back at the next meeting, that's also something that we would look forward to. So, Santa Barbara has a long history of addressing issues related to individuals that are poor, that are mentally ill or unstable and unhoused. Over the last 15 years, we've seen a greater impact related to misuse of public spaces for a variety of reasons, and specifically parks and recreation facilities. During this time, we focused on a range of management strategies related to trying to increase safety, perception of safety, improve usability, and reduce those impacts. And as I said initially, we're really realizing that we're at the point we need to broaden solutions, and just trying to find our way to manage out of the problem isn't necessarily always going to work. So why is this important to us and all residents, everyone in Santa Barbara as well? Our role as a department, our mission is to provide everyone with diverse open spaces. Our beaches, our parks, we have community forest resources, we have valuable creek and restoration and water quality enhancements, and our goal is to enrich people's lives with varied recreation and community services. Given that mission, how do we do that? Well, we have 60 parks and recreation facilities that we manage throughout the city, and for a small city, that's pretty amazing. Our responsibility is to maintain them in a safe, clean, and usable manner, promote the stewardship of the natural resources that are present, and provide the programming for youth, for adults, for groups, so that we're promoting healthy lifestyles and community vitality. And then there's the creek and ocean water quality component as we look at the effects of the urban environment and the use of the urban environment on the quality of habitats in our creeks and then in the ocean as well. Types of misuse that we experience, disruptive behavior, including verbal abuse and physical aggression. We have criminal activity, drug sales, prostitution, alcohol use. We have incidences of vandalism of our park resources, including restrooms and playgrounds. We increasingly are experiencing undesirable overnight use in our parks, despite having park hours that indicate when we do not want people present, as well as encampments. And then through many areas in the city, excessive trash that is left behind or is part of activity that's going on in those facilities. What are those impacts? At times there are areas that are obstructed by groups of individuals, areas that are intended for sports field use, picnicking, or children's play. We have a misuse of restrooms. You know, we take pride in the maintenance of our restrooms in terms of the number of times we're in there every single day cleaning it, but we can't be there all the time. So we could walk away and we've provided the service that's needed, and it just takes one activity that makes that restroom unsanitary or gives people the perception that it's unsafe to enter that restroom. Presence of large groups, public intoxication, and also fighting and verbal abuse occurs in a number of our parks and facilities. We experience on the beachfront and other areas interference of individuals with the actual ability to operate our facilities, and then also when individuals may rent those facilities for private events. As a result, we hear and we know and we see that there is a reduced public use of certain park areas due to people's concern about safety. There are department impacts, unsafe working conditions for our staff. Our staff are subject to verbal abuse, at times physical assault, and then have to deal with sometimes pretty significant sanitary conditions. Increased maintenance, either to fix something or to go back and clean something up. And then in our recreation programs and services, reduced participation. People that choose no longer to participate in our programs or have their children no longer participate in our programs due to an experience they have or a fear of an experience that they might have. Looking at where, what kind of resources we allocate to this, we've estimated over $500,000 every single year is spent addressing issues related to the misuse of our park and recreation facilities, which includes lost revenue, where individuals choose not to rent a facility due to what they see when they go to inspect it, or what they experience once they've actually rented it. We also, as you will hear further in the presentation, we invest in a variety of management strategies. We've yet to quantify how much we've spent doing those, but we have a pretty good sense of what it means in our park ranger resources. In your staff report, we call out over 2,100 times in the last 2 years, our park rangers have had to respond to an issue That's 3 a day over 2 years, instead of doing something else that might be of value to the department and, more importantly, of value to the community. So the areas, we have 60 parks and recreation facilities. There are 22 that really experience these issues most significantly. And they're in 4 areas of Santa Barbara. The waterfront area, and that's where there's a significant focus. And then also the Santa Barbara downtown. Upper State Street as well, so Mackenzie Park and Oak Park. We have these issues. And then on the east side, whether it's municipal tennis, the East Side Neighborhood Park, and then most recently we've been really trying to tackle the issues that we've been facing at Ortega Park. Commissioners that have talked about and approved, and you just had a little bit of the Cabrillo Ballpark project on your agenda. We've been trying to find a way to renovate that park to increase positive recreation use there, really in response to trying to reduce misuse. We've taken some steps that have been successful. We need to do more. So why these locations? Why do we think these locations are more likely to be areas where people congregate and perhaps engage in activities that are detrimental to broad public use and enjoyment? They're close to shelter or welfare services, free meal programs, either are in close proximity or at times on a regular basis are actually offered in our park areas. There's also liquor stores and fast food establishments, opportunity to solicit donations and solicit money or food from individuals that might be in a commercial area, which provides the ability for someone to go and purchase what they would like to consume. And it's also in places where we have facility amenities. Restrooms, number one. We all would think about that too if we're out in the open space or in a park and you want to consider that. If you want to spend any time anywhere, that's a consideration anyone has. But in this case, it brings the type of activity that can be very challenging for us to manage. Barbecues, opportunity to cook food and maintain food. And then also places to hang out, and picnic tables and benches are places that are easily somewhere to stay for extended periods of time and make it more difficult for others to enjoy that space. So I'm going to turn it over to Rich Hanna now, because we just would like to walk through very briefly, because this is supposed to be an introduction. We do have folks that do provide services to individuals in Santa Barbara that want to be part of this discussion, and they've voiced that to us, and we acknowledge that, and that's important. So today's meeting is really an introduction with the idea when we come back, certainly after your comments and questions, and we also have had the opportunity to spend some time speaking to other groups. You can have additional discussion, and they can provide their perspective on their role in the community related to supporting these populations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rich.
Good evening, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. Rich Hanna, Assistant Parks and Recreation Director. My role tonight is to continue the presentation and kind of illustrate the types of challenges, the things that we see and the public see on an everyday basis, and just draw your attention to some of these areas. The images that you see up in front of you on this slide, ideally represent the excessive trash that we see from encampments that are set up and then individuals leave. The lower left picture is the undesirable overnight camping that we'll see. That's right there at East Beach and between the wind shelters. Windbreaks right there in front of the Cabrera Pavilion bathhouse. And then to the right, that's at Plaza Del Mar restroom. And this is a good example of individuals or groups that often leads to intoxication, fighting, and verbal abuse. So moving on, part of our mission that Ms. Zachary spoke about earlier in the presentation is to provide safe parks and provide active recreation programming for individuals in this community. And I think you can see from these pictures here how difficult that can be when sports, picnicking, and children's play areas are obstructed. So up to the far left, and you'll hear a little bit more about this later in the presentation, this is Cabrillo Ballpark, a challenge that we had over almost a decade ago. We went in and we put in physical deterrents for this challenge here, and I'll speak to that later in the presentation. Over to the right is Plaza Veracruz Playground, and you can see that when we have this type of activity, you could see how people's perception of public safety may be altered and may not want to use this location for their children. To the lower left is Dwight Murphy Soccer Field. That's the bleacher area right there, and we run a lot of our youth programs there. We have weekend adult soccer leagues, and then to the right is the skate park. All right, we got a technical glitch here. It's hard to illustrate these issues when I don't have any pictures, so bear with us. There we go. All right, moving on. We talked briefly about this. Just to give you a bearing of these two locations, the one to the left is actually the Morton Bay Fig Tree, and then the one to the right is the Dwight Murphy Sycamore Creek area. We originally had a picture in there of Oak Park. We had decided to pull it at the last minute. Again, this just kind of speaks to the extra effort that the Parks Division has to do to maintain these areas after people vacate them, and where the resources are diverted from instead of providing regular, clean, safe parks for the community and all of our residents and visitors. So Cabrillo Pavilion in East Beach, I think most people think of this as a place of active recreation, summer camps. We've got weddings, special events in this location. This just illustrates something that we deal with on a daily basis, the undesirable overnight camping to the right underneath the promenade right there at the Cabrillo Bathhouse. And then out on the beach, just again, people's first experience when they visit the beach. This was what they might be greeted with. I want to talk a little bit about Plaza Del Mar. At one point, it was a thriving place for residents and visitors to come and recreate. That's changed over time, partly because trends and the area has changed. It no longer, Castillo Street no longer dead ends at Cabrillo there where Los Baños pool was. So the area has changed. Ideally, we're still looking to promote groups like the Argentine Festival there to the left to come in and actively use the park and bring people to this area. And I'll talk about programming solutions later in this report. The image to the right, and not saying that in any way this completely diminishes the activities that go on at Plaza Del Mar, is this one of the two unpermitted free meal programs provided in the community. This is the one right there at Plaza Del Mar. There's also another one that's conducted up at Alameda Park. And again, just kind of putting in perspective the two types of uses that go in the same park area. So we've talked briefly about just public concerns about safety and enjoyability. That can be a perceived expectation or a perception from people. And if they don't want to use our parks and facilities, they leave the areas less used, and that's a challenge for us. Ms. Zachary talked about the increased maintenance costs. Again, this can be associated with vandalism, upkeep of park equipment, and areas that are damaged. Staff safety and health concerns. We have some legitimate concerns as far as health and safety concerns. Staff are having to deal with human waste at times. They're having to deal with needles and syringes, things that really aren't written into a job description. And all of those things really lead to staff morale kind of taking a decline. We have a lot of pride in the programs and services and the parks and areas that we maintain and provide for this community. And you can see going out and dealing with some of these issues on a daily basis, or it could be less frequent than that, can actually just lead to staff morale declines. We've experienced some program participation decline. I've come to the commission before in the past and talked actively about programs that we've relocated from one area and what a difference that made. We moved a youth soccer program from Dwight Murphy Soccer Field one summer to Mackenzie Park. Participation grew, it boomed, families felt more comfortable. And so that's a successful way that we've moved programming around. But we've experienced people that withdraw from programs. We've had to issue refunds. And we really have to be careful. We're in a competitive market with other local providers, and we want to make sure that we have safe places for people to come and participate. We've seen some facility rental decline, primarily in the waterfront areas. And this can really just be from individuals or groups trying to enter somebody's private reception, demanding that they have entry to come in and eat food, and if they don't, they'll make it uncomfortable for the guests and the renter themselves, and oftentimes will lead to verbal abuse as well. All of these factors combined have led to revenue loss for the department. So what's in our tool chest as Parks and Recreation? So we've got the physical deterrents and the restrictions, and I'll go through these with some other slides. We've got the signage and reduction of park hours. That's something that we can do. We've got the security lighting and cameras, fencing, gates, and restroom closures, removal of barbecues, tables, vegetation, prohibition of alcohol. I think in the big picture, all of these physical deterrents actually impact all users of the parks and people that really want to use their neighborhood park for the right area. So coming in and putting in physical deterrents might be a way for us to strategize on helping to increase positive activity in the parks, but in some areas leads to less use of the park. We also have increased programming and increased enforcement. So these are some of the slides that illustrate department management strategies. I talked about the Cabrillo Ballpark earlier. About a decade ago, we were having ongoing issues at that site. We went in and we completely fenced off the restroom area, the dugout area, closed the restroom for other than for permitted play. Those mitigation steps changed the use of the park, and I'm happy to say that we've had groups like Pony Baseball and AYSO return to the park and actually actively program the activities in the afternoons after the school hour, and they have access to the restrooms when they're permitted activities. The slide to the lower left is the half hour after sunset. Many of our parks actually close at 10 p.m. Some of our parks, we've gone in and changed that to close 1/2 hour after sunset, and I think you'll see some more of that maybe as we move forward. And then again, just other regulatory signage that we have as it relates to people visiting our parks and the areas adjacent to our parks. Other department management strategies. This is the Ortega Welcome House basketball court area to the left there. We've had security lighting installed there. There's also security cameras at this location. The picture to the right was in 2008. The Parks Division went in and took out the wall to increase sight lines into the park to dissuade activity there. One of the things is you are aware of is there was a town hall meeting to discuss Ortega Park just this year. So 8 years after taking the wall down, we still are working to improve Ortega Park for everybody. And then this is the active programming, and it could be slightly deceiving. The image to the left is the police department using the Welcome House to conduct one of their staff briefings. So having increased activity at the Welcome House, whether that's the police department or other youth providing groups, or frankly anybody that's out there looking for a great location, we would welcome it. To the right, this is the Westmont soccer team working with the Special Olympics group in the park. And the department's still continuing to explore opportunities to increase activity at the swimming pool, the fields, provide safe access to restrooms at the pool. And really what we've found is the more activity that's in a park, it makes it feel more welcoming, a little bit less desirable, and we just really get more of that kind of positive feeling with our parks and facilities. At the beginning, we talked briefly about the financial information. This just kind of summarizes which each of the divisions in the department experience on an annual basis. This is unfunded. And you can see the costs that are associated with some of the items that have been included in this report. And before I go to this slide, I'd like to welcome Lieutenant Olson to come up and talk about the role of the Santa Barbara Police Department and some of their strategies that they're using at this time.
There we go. Good evening. My name is Lieutenant Olson. I am with the police department. I have been with 26 years. I've got a varied history with the agency. Quite a bit of that with Detective Bureau, restorative policing, and all of that's really helped me kind of understand some of the problems we're dealing with within our parks. Currently being a watch commander, each of the watch commanders are assigned to two particular geographical areas within the city. I happen to be assigned to the east side and to the waterfront, which is where the majority of the parks that we have the biggest problems right now. I actually volunteered for those two sections based on my past history. I developed the more robust version of our restorative policing program and restorative justice because in the course of the last 5 years, California has made it very difficult to enforce a lot of laws on nuisance-related behavior. There's no more stick. There's no incentive to get people to change their behavior. In fact, sometimes by taking an enforcement action, we're indoctrinating people and learning what they can get away with without having to pay a price. So we've started to figure ways to be very creative at how to combat that. I was very happy to work with the Parks Department on our most recent issues surrounding Ortega Park, and we are embarking on some new ideas that are kind of exciting, and it's going to be a pilot program. We don't know if we're going to be able to get it off the ground, but we're looking at making some injunctions against people that are the most problematic there. Now, that can't be based on any one person. We have to look at who the people are that are creating the biggest problem. So it's the number of problems that become the target, not the actual individual. So I'm working with the city attorney's office and trying to figure out how we can make that work, how it looks. I've already compiled a list of data for them to kind of look over. And if that works, then we'll see if we can employ that at some other parks. Some of the issues at Ortega Park, and Mr. Hanna said it beautifully, we make some environmental changes that we believe are in the best interest of safety that are counter to the way we want the park to be used by the people that want to enjoy the park and create a new type of problem. Ortega Park is a great example. The security lighting is definitely important for nighttime vandalism, but it sends a message to people that want to use the basketball courts at night, but we have the park currently shut down half hour after sunset. So we've actually contacted people that are using the park in a legitimate fashion and asked them, we're trying to get some compliance, we're trying to help the neighbors in the area take back this park, and until we get some stasis, we're going to have to ask you to leave the park. Now, how hard is that to do when people are just trying to play basketball? So it becomes, it's a challenge and it's a moving target. I have a couple of really interesting ideas that we've tabled right now, but I hope the beginning of the year we'll be meeting with Parks in regards to some issues at Plaza Del Mar that'll be kind of unique in some joint use permits with City College. Try to increase some opportunities for participation there to make that park look more like West Campus. But these are all inventive ideas, and what you're not hearing is cops in the park writing tickets. And I think everybody in this audience and at the table here think, well, this is a police problem. Let's just get in there and arrest people. Well, I made this a point at our Ortega Park meeting. I don't want to come in and explain what our woes are, because the takeaway from a meeting like that is there's nothing we can do. What I'm telling you is there's plenty we can do, and many of the things that we are doing are brand new. And it's going to take time to implement, but it's the new things that we're going to have to try to get change, because the old ways are not suiting us anymore. Jails are overcrowded. The first people that they're going to release from jail are nuisance-related behavior. Most of the codes that we use are municipal codes. If you get cited with a municipal code, it doesn't go to warrant, it goes to civil assessment. Most of these people don't have any money to pay a fine with, so they get community service. Community service can be as simple as serving food in a food line at a food service area that they already go to. So again, there's no real stick. There's no deterrent to bad behavior. And every time you issue somebody a citation or arrest somebody for that type of violation, they learn that there's just no real penalty for it. So they don't mind continuing in the nuisance behavior. So this is where we come in, and this is where we're going to have to find very unique ways to address these challenging events. There are some things that are in the hopper currently, and there's some things that we're looking at in the future. We're very excited about what the future holds for us, and it's these challenging times that gets us to rethink as a community on how to take this back. And if I could just leave one point, in about 10 years ago with Cabrillo Ballpark, I remember what the ballpark looked like before we put the fences around it. I remember what the problems were. I was in our tactical patrol force, which deals mainly with the homeless population. I remember the unsightliness and the hazardous issues that were created by the homeless that had really taken over the park. And really some neat ideas came about, and we fenced off the area, and we were able to take that park back. And for a period of time, I would drive by the park and I'd see people out there playing ball and having fun. That's exactly what we need. We need that participation, because the more that we can use a park for legitimate uses, the more opportunity it is to dissuade illegal use of that park. So the question then bears, if we're going to fight so hard to take something back, then this is where the community comes in. We all have to chip in and use that park and take it back and dissuade that bad behavior. I have some suggestions that we'll be making to the parks and some ideas that we came up with on some ideas for Ortega Park for springtime that I think are very exciting and think will be some big, hopefully, press opportunities and get that to kind of push through some of our other parks, not only on the east side and the beachfront, but citywide. So I'm happy to take any questions if.
Thank you. And that pretty much wraps up the staff presentation. So we will go to questions and comments. I don't have any speaker slips for this item. And as I said, this is just the beginning of this discussion. So questions or comments from.
Did someone down there have? I have one.
Okay, Ms. Wiscombe.
Lieutenant Olson, thank you very much. I appreciated yours and Mr. Hanna's and Ms. Zachary's presentations. I was kind of researching this a little bit because this is obviously, as Chair Longstreet said, this is an issue that's been on our forefront for a long time. Have we explored any sort of adopt a park or neighborhood watch for parks like they do in neighborhoods? Is that a concept that might work, or?
Yes. Currently with Ortega Park, we're working with a resident there, and we're going to try a pilot program, and we're calling it the Park Captain. There's somewhat of a, if you can imagine, you have 10 residents all calling dispatch for the same problem. Dispatch is trying to figure out which person has the best information, creates a backlog. Dispatchers get frustrated, so you never know where you're at in the call. So by the time the ninth person calls, tensions get high and they feel that they're not being listened to. So the idea is to have the neighbors work collectively, funnel one point of contact to dispatch. We'll get the resources there to address that. It gives some buy-in to the residents nearby. It reduces the conflict between the caller and the dispatch, the call taker, and hopefully is a cleaner line of information to address problems. It's kind of a small concept to adopt a park, but those are the grassroots that we want to embark, because that's where we're going to get our best leaders to then go to the next step and get more participation from the neighborhoods.
Right, because the things that I read from the staff report, it's clear that public perception is really the key here, and you know, whether the threats are real or not, if the public, you know, perceives that there's a potential of some sort of a threat, then, you know, we need to deal with that public perception and how to solve that. I was also looking, someone had told me about the city of Fresno has a 24/7 one call center. So they have one number that anyone can call for anything, and then they get directed to the right place. And they also have an app that called Fresco, I guess, that where you can actually on your phone, if you're, you know, tech savvy, use that to report citywide issues. So I was thinking maybe this is something else that you know might be explored, where it all goes to one place and then gets disseminated to the appropriate responder, you know, so to speak, whether it's a police matter or parks maintenance or whatever.
Sure. Fresno's a very big city, and you definitely want to be able to channel to the most appropriate responder for that. I would say if there's any issue in a park where safety is a matter, call 911. Don't worry about an emergency line or non-emergency line. Call 911. It's the same dispatch center. And if it's a long-term related goal issue, talk to parks. Parks, we partner up really well. We're going to hear from them anyway, and we'll figure out what additional resources that we can use to employ to try to combat some of these problems.
Right. Okay. And I also, just as a comment, I in the staff report, well, okay, my comments, let me just go to this one first. I think, you know, it's important that where the police officers are involved, or the watch commanders, and that there's I know in the staff report it says they'll be there at the beginning of the season of any sanctioned activity. And I think it's important that there's some sort of drop-by, unannounced component to when they show up, because that keeps people on their toes, I think, in terms of, what they're doing if it's an unsanctioned activity.
If I might be able to respond to that, recently at Ortega Park, we were looking at what we've done there in the last 6 months. We were looking at our statistical data, and it talks about how many citations, how many field interview cards, how many crime reports we took there. But our current data tracking system also allows us to create an electric barrier, if you will, and we can see every time a patrol car drove through there. So there's plenty of times we're putting eyes on the park where it doesn't dictate an opportunity or a need for us to engage. So we're actively involved in all of our parks. And I can say that Chief Luno, our new chief of police, is really reinvigorating our efforts with reaching out into the community, being more involved in the community. And I think we also are getting quite a few bodies back on patrol, which is really refreshing for me to be able to staff our patrol beats. So I think we're going to be able to kind of get out of that funk that we've been in for several years in terms of manpower, at least at the patrol sector. Our beat coordinators take on more of the long-term projects, also help define some unique ways of addressing unique issues. Our investigative unit is working some of these park issues when we are talking about drug usage, drug sales. Also, Santa Barbara needs to be prepared with the legalized marijuana issue. Recreational marijuana, you can't use that in a public place. That is not the case for medical marijuana. Mm-hmm. You can legally smoke marijuana wherever you can smoke a cigarette if you have a marijuana card. That is going to become very difficult for us to combat because who has a card and it's recreational anyway, and it's sticky, and we're going to be figuring out those waters when we get there.
Right. Yeah, you've got your hands full.
We certainly
definitely.
do.
Well, thank you.
But we're up for
that.
the challenge.
Yeah, and I also I just wanted to say in the staff report that I thought the work I favored the securing of permits by the Central Coast Collaborative on Homelessness, C3H, to mitigate for impacts in the parks, because I think that's important. That was a really interesting aspect of the staff report to know that you have people providing lunches and things like that and food service to people in our parks that are, and it's a great program, but it has a huge impact on our parks in terms of trash and I think probably just hanging around and what can happen from hanging around and makes, again, people uncomfortable. Public perception is a lot. So I thought the staff report was great, and thank you all for your comments.
Other questions or comments?
Chair Longstreet, if I could just jump in. I know other commissioners want to say anything. Just back to Commissioner Wiscombe's suggestion about adopting a park. If you think about the locations that we're talking about, not all of them have residents around them. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason why people gravitate to locations as well, because there could be times where there's less people around, or the people that are around are only passing through. Anecdotally, what we find, and perhaps if you, as you speak to anyone that you know in the community, people also just avoid areas where they don't want to go, rather than want to get engaged and become part of a watch. They just don't go there anymore. And when we all selectively choose places we go and don't go, whether it's the grocery store at 5 o'clock or whether it's a park because of the type of activity, because you want to avoid conflict and you don't want to be concerned about your safety. So that's what we really struggle with as a department is, yes, in some cases neighbors do get active and they really do want solutions. In other cases, it's really up to us in the community, the broader community, to come up with solutions. But I appreciate your idea.
Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
Yes, thank you for the report. I work at the Independent Living Resource Center, and we serve about 200 with some people with all types of disabilities, including mental health issues. I just want to remind the commissioner and the officers that as we're talking about solution, we need to be very careful to not stigmatize people. In the report I read, there was prepared a kind of staff frustration with people, and I want to remind people that Santa Barbara is in a housing crisis, that these problems don't happen because people often choose to be homeless or choose to engage in behaviors. Sometimes they do that, but sometimes they have other issues going around, which causes them to have to use public spaces in a way we don't deem as appropriate, and I think I would hate to see the police department under the new chief launch a campaign of stigmatization and fear among people with serious mental health disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you're right. We don't want to stigmatize people, but I think that there's also many people with mental health issues who are victimized in our parks and in some unsafe settings that we have to also be aware of. You know that. Yeah, it's a complicated problem, and I think that's partly why we think we're not going to have the answers to it. It's a community issue, and it's going to take community solutions. But as a Parks and Recreation Commission, we've heard from quite a few people of the issues in our parks, and we do need to address them. And we need to address them with the agencies in the community. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to make two quick comments. I wanted to thank everybody for the report. It was really informative. Also, I love that you're talking about out-of-the-box solutions, things that we haven't tried before, I think are oftentimes the only way forward. So it's really refreshing to hear that, and you're working in different places with different people. Also really glad that the department is getting fully staffed. The second thing I did want to comment on was about the organized, unregulated free meals, and also the medical, Doctors Without Walls. I think those are really, really valuable programs, and I feel like there's got to be a way to collaborate more closely with the organizations that are doing this good work, because obviously they would not, I'm sure they're concerned as well about the unintended, consequences of providing these services in public areas. I know you mentioned about permitting. I think that's a good way to start, but also just, working. They have tons of volunteers that are obviously providing those services. What if some of them were the cleanup crew, or, trying to address some of those other unintended consequences as well as providing that service? I just would hate to see them to be deterred because of more bureaucracy or red tape. I know it's a sticky situation, but I just got to imagine that there's a way to collaborate more cohesively with those programs.
Commissioners, just so you know, we've spent some time trying to engage in that dialogue, and so it needs to continue so that we get to some of the things that you're suggesting.
Okay. Well, I would love to be more involved in that.
Okay. So I think, do you have any?
I agree with much of what was said, and thank you for coming to us. The only thought I had that hasn't been mentioned yet is you're absolutely right. It's going to be the community that has to take back our parks. But if they're too scared to do that, it's not going to happen. So I think a higher police presence during the rollout over the next couple of years would be helpful.
We will continue to maintain a heavy priority and enforcement posture in all the parks. We recognize what the parks represent. And speaking on behalf of the police department, I do appreciate what the Parks Commission does. It's a beautiful city with a ton of beautiful parks. And we love those parks just as much as the residents here do. And we hate to see them abused in the way that they are. And to speak just a little bit in terms of treating people holistically, we recognize that to solve this problem, it's not just simply an enforcement problem anymore. So every enforcement contact we make is also coupled with some sort of resolution to try to help that person. Most of the people are very service resistant, but we recognize why they're there. And we're looking at all the partners that we can call upon to help mitigate that particular issue. And at some point, each one of those people hit that point where they just don't want to sleep in the park one more night, and that's when they'll reach out to us. But they're only going to do that if we have that communication and that relationship with them too. In my 26 years, I've seen a complete shift in the way in which we treat everybody in this community. I'm an honored public servant, and I just think that there's nothing that Santa Barbara can't accomplish. There's one way into town, one way out of town, and we're very inventive and very creative, and I think we've got really good people that are willing to step up and handle this problem.
Thank you. Any staff wrap up? I think we're done. Okay, so we will continue this item, and thank you for the report and everyone's participation. And that brings us to our advisory committee interviews, which I see everyone patiently waiting out there for us. We have several to do tonight, and we will start with the Golf Advisory Committee. What we will do is we will bring you up and have you give us just a brief outline. Many of you are here for reappointments, and so, you know, that's great. We appreciate that. But we're going to start with Maureen Mason. And she's the only applicant for the Women's Club Golf Representative.
Are we taking these all at once or separately?
I think the ones that have some specific category, well, let's take them all together. We'll do everybody.
We'll do the whole GAC.
Yeah, we'll do the whole GAC. Okay.
Hey, everybody?
No.
Oh.
No. You get your own turn.
Good evening. I'm Maureen Masson, and I'm applying for the representing the Women's Golf Club at Municipal Golf Course.
And you have been on since 2001?
Yes, a few years.
Through a lot of changes with us, so.
Well, what I did was I emailed everybody and spoke to the Women's Golf Club, the board and everything else, and nobody else, I didn't want to take it if someone else wanted to do it. But they want me to continue, so I'm more than happy to do that.
Well, thank you for your service.
Okay.
Okay, and next is Toby Ayers. Nope. Dan Dawson. Do we have Dan here? Mark Gomez. Mr. Gomez, come on up. And if you'd just like to tell us a little bit about yourself, you're a new applicant to us, and why you're interested in the Golf Advisory Committee.
Sure. My name is Mark Gomez, and thank you for seeing me. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara. Last time I won a golf tournament was at the Santa Barbara City in 1986. I hung up my golf clubs. I was a team captain at La Cumbra and Santa Barbara High School back in 1980. I've gotten to a point in my life where I'm able to give back, and what a better way to do that than, I grew up on Muni, with Buddy Allen, Al Geiberger, those players. And I just saw it as a great opportunity, because I coming from a golfing background, my father was one of the founders of Los Paisanos Latinos. And so I grew up at the golf course helping him out. And again, I saw the opportunity, and I thought, what a great way to give back. So that's why I'm here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are you a member of Los Paisanos at this point?
Not anymore. No, I'm actually a current apprentice in the PGM program, getting my credentials to teach. And I just had lunch with Richard Chavez probably, a few months ago to give me some, pointers about being a pro.
Ms. Wiscombe, did you have a question?
Do I understand you? Are you playing golf now?
Yes, I am. I'm currently practicing for the PAT, or the player's ability test. There are 3 different categories to becoming a pro. I've already passed the background check, and I've passed a written exam, which includes the history of golf and the policies and procedures.
So when do you expect to get your credentials as a pro?
I would say within about 3 years. But it's a process.
Okay.
I have to work at a golf course, and my wife and I buy and sell properties, and that's kind of frees up my time for golf.
And have you played at Muni lately?
I practiced there. No, but I grew up about on Modoc Road, which is down the road from there.
Right.
So I played there many, many times.
So where are you playing golf now?
Actually, to practice, I'm fortunate enough, I go from La Purísima, because we have a vacation property off of 154, Rancho San Marcos, and I go all the way to Ojai, to Sol Park, and everywhere in between.
Okay.
So I play a lot of different courses to really hone my game.
Okay,
So
but not Muni.
Not right now.
Okay,
Because that's
great.
kind of an easier course.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Other questions or questions for Mr. Gomez? No. Okay. James Patterson. Mr. Patterson.
I'm James Patterson, and I've been playing Muni for 27 years. I do it regularly with the group, and I'm volunteering to be on the committee with the idea of helping to improve the play there in the sense that make it better for existing players and attracting new ones, because over the years I've seen Muni do very well, and I've seen it suffer, and I would like to do what I can to bring it back to being a prominent golf course in our local community.
Do you have some ideas you'd like to share with us about that?
Well, number one, I'd like to see the golf course itself become what I would say more consistent in the condition. The sand traps are very inconsistent. The greens are very inconsistent. The fairways are doing much better in spite of the drought, but they're inconsistent. So I would like to see that improve dramatically. I would also like to see more marketing activity on the part of the people who are running the pro shop. Make it more attractive for other people to play there more frequently.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Patterson? Yes.
So do you play anywhere else besides Muni?
I have played every golf course in this town, but that's the one that I play consistently.
Oh, and how many times do you play? Do you play weekly?
I've been in a group for 11 years that plays every Wednesday, and I think the only time any of us miss is when we do get a few drops of rain.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a question. Do you have ideas on how to involve more young people in golf? We see an aging demographic, but not a lot of young people.
You know, that's a challenging question, because I do see a lot of really young kids being brought to the golf course by their parents and being taught some of the basic fundamentals. And all I would say is you need to expand that program.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Next would be Mike. Do you have anything else you want to add for us?
No, that's
okay.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Woodard. Excuse me. Mr. Woodard. Welcome. We recently interviewed you, didn't we?
Not long ago.
Not long ago. Well, welcome back. Thank you for coming back.
I survived.
You survived? Okay. Would you like to share with us how your experience has been?
It has been a learning experience. You know, I've enjoyed it. It took a while to figure out the flow of things, but I think I'm fitting in and able to participate and help out.
Any grand ideas for the golf course?
any grand ideas for the. I think we're on a good course, actually. You know,
Good.
there's a lot of things in place right now, and if we follow through and most of them come to fruition, I think there's a general improvement in play right now.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for your service. And
What he wears on his feet when he plays golf.
what do you wear on your feet when you play golf? I think I got
when
set up.
possible, nothing. I prefer to play with a naked foot.
There you go.
Yeah.
We accept all kinds. See? Diversity.
They do.
That means he must have a real feel for the fairways.
I don't overswing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your service. We do appreciate it. Any other questions for Mr. Woodard?
Yeah, thanks.
No? Okay.
Thanks.
I don't see John Craig.
Yeah, he's here.
Is there? Oh, there you are. Hiding back there, John.
He wouldn't miss this.
Oh, no, this is too exciting. I've been doing this for many, many years. I'm the vice chair of the GAC currently. I'm the chair of the Players Improvement Fund, which coordinates with now Corsco and the players that play the course for prioritizing the stuff that we need done on the golf course, like the gentleman you're asking about. Things that we need to do. Well, it's already in place that we get input from the players. We prioritize it. The Players Improvement Fund takes $1 per green fee and puts it in our fund. And currently we have close to $40,000 so that we can augment Corsco's strategies that they want to do and improve in our golf course. So the transition with Corsco, there was some trepidation at the beginning, but I think now that we've got to know them and dealt with them now for a year or so, or not quite a year, but it's been a real pleasant surprise, and they're doing a great job. And as most of the people that have played Muni now can attest, it's in a lot better shape than it was. Of course, a lot of that has to do with the reclaimed water coming back on, but it is. They're doing a great job, and I'd be willing to hang around for another year. There's a transition period now for the PIF that at the beginning of the year we're going to select a new board and do those types of things. So I think it'd be an easier transition if I was there rather than not be there for that.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say things are going well, because I know it was a difficult transition for you, that you weren't supportive of it, and I'm glad to hear that it's going well. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Dominic Naiman. You're next, Mr. Naiman.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Dominic Namneth. I'm the current chair of the Golf Advisory Committee, and I think I was just told I've been doing it for like 9 years. Over the course of this 9 years, we saw a lot of things happening, a lot of milestones on the golf course. The Creeks project was completed on the golf course, and for good, bad, better or worse, it's there now, and it's doing their job on the beach that I go to almost every day. So I'm happy for that. We saw that the decline in play. We saw the course deteriorating because of the drought and other situations out of our control. But when we created the Player Improvement Fund, with the idea that we can do something about it as golfers, and we added the $1 to the fee, we've put back in a couple $100,000 at this point back into the golf course, and not taking it from the general fund or anything else. And now the transition to Corsco, we're at this exciting place where we have a black number in our budget for capital improvements. And so now the fund begins. We can start directing what's important to the golfers, to the Parks and Rec Department, and to the Commission. And I don't want to leave now when the fund starts. So
we have weathered some tough times, haven't we?
We have.
Are there other questions? Thank you for your service. I know both you and John and Mo have been around quite a long time, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm part of the younger group.
Okay. I'll make sure to note that. Larry Nolan.
Be careful what you say. You know.
Good evening. I'm Larry Nolan. I'm part of the Younger at Heart group. I've served on the Golf Advisory Commission many years ago, and I've been in both the men's clubs at Muni. I'm sort of applying, I think, as an at-large representative, although I might have written it down differently on my application. I retired a couple years ago from aerospace, making solar arrays for satellites, and been more involved in golf again. I play at all the courses. One thing I've always appreciated about Muni is I didn't take up golf till I was 56, and it sort of allowed me to do that because I could play terribly for $25 a round instead of $100 a round. So I could play terribly 4 times for the same price as going to Sandpiper or something like that. So I appreciated that as to give me a chance to improve, and so I hope to keep trying to do that. So I'd like to contribute if I can. I am a chairman of the Santa Barbara Senior Golf Championship that we put on every year. We like to think of as one of the 3 big tournaments of the year: the City, the Classic, and the Seniors. And I am happy to say I lured Dominic into co-chairing, and I hope taking over from me for next year. He did a tremendous job with his
Don't give it all away now.
with his magical digital displays that was very popular, I think, with the participants. They could go around the course and see what their scores were real time. That was great. So we really appreciate his many skills in that regard.
Okay. Are there questions for Mr. Nolan? No? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our golf interviews. So we have 2 positions that have only one applicant for them. That's the Women's Club and Los Paisanos. So
I would make a motion.
Let's hear a motion.
Okay. I would move that Women's Club, Maureen Masson, for Paisanos, John Craig, for Men's Club, Dominic Namneth, and for at-large, Michael Woodard, James Patterson, and Larry Nolan.
I'll second.
Okay, and we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And Mr. Gomez, I hope you will get involved in the golf course. Thank you. I mean, just because you didn't get appointed this time doesn't mean you still don't have something to offer to our golf course. So thank you very much. And all of you, thank you for your time. And now we have Street Tree Advisory Committee, finally. Thank you for coming early. And we start with Mr. Cunningham. Well, you're the first on the list. Okay, we'll start with Maury Tremont. You can be really short. You just have to stand up. We know you're both incumbents. Just, Maury, come on.
Oh, you want me to?
Just go. Yeah, he's back there. But I want you ready.
Maury Tremont. I believe this is my 5th reapplication, and I would be very honored to serve once again.
Thank you. Any questions for her? All righty. Mr. Cunningham.
Just I wanted to tell her how impressed I was with her knowledge earlier.
Oh, good. Yes. Did you hear that, Maury?
I was just telling you how very much I was impressed with all of your knowledge earlier. I think we're lucky to have you.
Mr. Cunningham.
Hi, Bob Cunningham. Let's see, I've been practicing landscape architecture in Santa Barbara for over 40 years. I'm probably responsible for hundreds of trees in this town, having planted or specified them. And from that comes a lot of experience with how trees behave and what tree is appropriate where. I've made some mistakes and learned from them, and I think I've got a good grounding in trees. I'd like to say that Maury is a pleasure to work with on the advisory committee, and I think we have a really good balance with a couple of designers and a couple of very well-qualified technical people, plus Des O'Neill. And I would very much like to serve again. I don't recall how long I've been on the committee, but I really enjoy it. And
Well, we have 2 positions and we have 2 applicants, so I think you're pretty good. Ms. Wiscombe.
So I would make a motion. First of all, I'd like to say, as I've been the liaison to Street Tree Advisory for quite a few years now, and thank you both very much for your service. You've provided very valuable contribution, and I'd also like to just give a pitch for Tim Downey. Mr. Downey, you've just done a terrific job, too. So it would be my pleasure to nominate Bob Cunningham and Maury Treeman for another term on the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
I'd second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're in. Thank you for your service. Okay. That brings us to the CIP. I have a request for a 5-minute break, so while you get set up, may we take a little break?
Yes, Chair Longstreet.
So we will come back at 5:55.
cansado de sofrer. Encontro coração também cansado de sofrer. E tempo de se pensar que o amor pode de repente chegar. Quando existe alguém que tem saudade de outro alguém, e esse outro alguém não entender, deixe esse novo amor chegar, mesmo que depois seja imprescindível chorar. Que tal lá foi eu quem não tentei raciocinar nas coisas do amor que ninguém pôde explicar. Vem, nós dois vamos tentar só um novo amor. Pude a saudade apagar. E tal lá foi eu quem mal tentei raciocinar nas coisas do amor que ninguém pode explicar. Vem, nós dois vamos tentar.
I am calling back to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting. And we are going to go a little bit out of order to item 8 because it had an estimated time at 6 p.m. and we have a very long item ahead of it. So tonight we're hearing an appeal of the Arts and Crafts Advisory Committee decision on a violation of the Code of Conduct. That is all we're hearing, is the violation of the Code of Conduct and the written warning. The format will be 20 minutes maximum for the staff presentation, 20-minute maximum for the appellant. We will then hear from any Arts and Crafts Advisory Committee members who are here to speak. Then it'll go to the commission. We'll go to the commission for questions. We'll go to public comment, and then we'll have a decision. I will hold you to the time. You do not have to use all of the time, I want to say. So we will start. Mr. Bryan, you want to give the staff presentation?
Thank you, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. My name is Jason Bryan. It's a pleasure to present to you this evening. This is a matter... Oh, we need to get the computer on. Is that... Oh, here we go. Uh-oh. Terry. One moment, please. Okay. Apologies for the technical difficulty. We're here for a matter of appeal of the Arts and Crafts Show Advisory Committee of a decision that was that was made by the committee. A little background on the way that the show works. The Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show has been established in cooperation with the city for nearly 52 years. It's been operating. The rules and regulations and the procedures have been developed over those 51 plus years in cooperation between an advisory committee representing the members of the Arts and Crafts Show and the city. The complaint violation and appeals process are clearly defined as part of the procedures and regulations that have been developed over those years, and we followed those that process in this case. This stems from an incident that occurred on July 2nd, and a complaint was received by staff on that day. This was not a regular Sunday show. This was a Saturday holiday show. There are a number of Saturday holiday shows that are offered as part of the Arts and Crafts Show. The incident happened before the official start time of the show, but it was received in relation to people setting up and claiming spaces for the show. The complaint, which has been included in your packets, indicates that David Sugich had arrived early in the morning, had not set up on the grass, but was setting up a table in front on the sidewalk, which is something that has been a fairly customary and common practice. People have been getting there earlier and earlier. But the allegation was that Jeff Kennedy arrived approximately 5:30 in the morning, and there was an altercation between the two of them where Mr. Sugich reported that Jeff Kennedy pushed him with his chest. There was some shouting, and a table was kind of wrestled and eventually thrown, hitting David Sugich's leg. David did provide pictures of some scrapes that happened in relation to that. Following up on this, as the procedures and regulations dictate, we have an investigation. So I did send an email requesting a response from Mr. Kennedy. None was received until the violation hearing of the Arts and Crafts Show Advisory Committee was held. Mr. Kennedy did make a statement that was read in its entirety at the meeting. David Sugich was present at the meeting, made a statement as to what had transpired that morning. And we actually had Janice Hillenbach, another person who didn't directly visually witness it, but heard the commotion, heard what she described as Mr. Kennedy saying, hearing David say, "Put down my table," and hearing some argument that happened on the show line that morning. The Arts and Crafts Show, after hearing the reports from show members, reading the material that was presented, considered the case, and they voted unanimously to issue a written warning to Mr. Kennedy for violating the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct, one of the statements is that rules need to be followed and physical violence is never tolerated. In that meeting, I did emphasize that for all show members, that if there's ever physical violence, do not hesitate to call 911, because that should not be a condition at the show or in any of our programs. The recommendation is that the Commission deny the appeal of Jeff Kennedy and uphold a unanimous decision of the Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show in issuing a written warning to Mr. Kennedy in this case. My presentation is very brief. I know we do have two speakers from the show as well as Mr. Kennedy, and I'd like at this time to open it up for any questions or to move the agenda along.
Does the Commission have any questions at this point? We will have more time for questions later. Okay, so we will now move to Mr. Kennedy's presentation. If you'd like to come on up, and I'll, if you need all your time, I will give you a 5-minute warning.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Jeff Kennedy. I'm an artist, photographer, and I do some paintings at the show. I've been in the show for over 30 years. I think my behavior at the show has been exemplary. This It's a very unfortunate circumstance. I don't feel any of it has been truthful. There's three reasons why I would like you to dismiss this, and the first being I was involved in another hearing before this commission, and it also involved a matter that occurred before the show started, about 5 in the morning. One of the show members came up and started pounding on my car. My wife was sitting in it, pounded on the windows. I was walking our dog at the time, and I warned her to stop this behavior or I was going to call the police. She made threatening remarks. I subsequently filed a police report. I gave you a lot of written material to review before I came in here. I hope you did review it. And after that, there was a hearing at the advisory committee, kind of a cross-complaint thing at the time, where I complained and her son complained, and it ended up being appealed by Judith McCaffrey to this commission that I had somehow scared this lady, Ms. Martell, by threatening to call the police if she didn't stop her actions at this time in the morning. Now, at the advisory committee meeting at the time, there was a great deal of time spent, and it was the unanimous opinion of the advisory committee and others in the show that this wasn't a show matter. This was something that was long before the show started. The show recreation department had no material presence. They had no monitor. They had no rules. They had nothing. It was no better than if somebody said, gee, if you want to come to work, you've got to show up at the door at 6 in the morning and then fight over the desks. We're put in a pretty untenable situation. So, again, that was brought before the commission. The commission reviewed all this. They heard witness statements. They heard my statement. And they also decided at the time that nothing that happens before the show starts or before the park opens at 6 was any part of the purview of the recreation department or the commission, that we were supposed to call the police. So that's the way it stood and has stood. Other people have called the police. I've had to call the police on people that are assaulting or doing something down at the show, and that's the way it's handled. Now, this time, it got to the monitor, Tricia Dalzell. She wrote up something with David Sujic that this is a complete bunch of bunk, and never even bothered to come down and ask me what happened. When I approached her, she said, oh, I knew what you would say. Of course, I asked her, why don't you include that in the report then? And also, she made comments about Mr. Sujic as one of the kindest and gentlest men that she's ever known. So I don't know what's going on with those two, but I'll tell you what happened. I came back to find some tables across the top of a rope that I had stretched across trying to reserve a space. And I could tell at that point that there could be conflict. I didn't want the conflict. I've been through this before, so I attempted to get my rope out from under these tables. As soon as I moved the tables, this guy jumped out of his truck, barreled over, shoved the table into me, knocking me over. Then when I got up to push the table back, he grabbed his arms and barreled into me and knocked me over, or knocked me back again. And so we tussled. I told him I needed this rope. He says, you're not moving my tables. I finally got my rope out from under the table, and I moved 50 yards up the show and got another space to get away from the guy. He was just nuts. He was screaming and yelling. It was a terrible situation, horrible situation for anybody to be into. So that's what happened. The other point I'd like to make is that, or the other reason I'd like to say that this should be dismissed, besides this having been judged by the commission not to be in the purview of the recreation department, it is on a city street. It is on a sidewalk. It happens way before even any 6 o'clock time. Sometimes 4:30 in the morning, where people are down there at 3:30. It happens. There's always some sort of argument. The city recreation department knows about it. They refuse to put a presence down there. There was a time when we had a monitor down there at 6 in the morning because there's what we call a coin toss rule where you flip for a space, and the monitors were flipping and controlling a situation at 6 at least. Well, now there's no one. No one shows up until about 9 o'clock. So these kinds of things with people on one side or the other, they come in, support their friends. In this case, it's mostly craftspeople. And the arts people, frankly, are very scared of the craftspeople. It's been they will not show down there because of the craftspeople. It's gotten that bad. And again, the city knows this. The recreation department knows it. Jason knows it. But the city has just abandoned us. I call it a constructive abandonment. They just pull back, won't put anybody down there, won't control the situation. But yet, here I am because of something that happened that should probably be more of a police matter than anything else. Again, during the shows, I have no problems with anybody. Nobody has problems with me. We have had no subsequent issues between the two of us. So just to put your mind at rest that this is something out of left field. Lastly, I sent you a lot of material that I hope you reviewed that concerns a lot of the things that happen with this advisory committee, with these procedures and regulations. They've built up over the years. I think they're a legacy that should be analyzed, if nothing else, and corrected. I think the city, through the recreation departments, kind of abrogated its duties to the paying public, which is me. I pay to be in a program that's supposed to be run by the recreation department. And in my estimation, a lot of other people, it's run very poorly right now. And it endangers people. I would suggest that once you start down the road of saying, well, in the case of one comment that the city attorney, I guess, made it the furtherance of the show. Well, I hope you find it in your hearts to kind of further the show by cleaning up this mess that happens on these Saturday mornings, where it's a first come, first served, wild, mob rule, people making up their own rules about putting all kinds of objects out to claim spaces and then jumping in. And again, the city's not there. It's something that really needs to be fixed, and it's hurting the participation in the program. So those are the three reasons that I'd ask you to dismiss this. Like I said, this has been run through before. It's been decided that it's not in the purview of the Recreation Department or the Parks and Recreation Commission. Like I said, I'm innocent. I didn't do it. I got attacked. No one bothered to even ask me about it. The monitor didn't. So that's why we rolled through this whole thing, and they've completely ignored my position on this. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We're going to go to public comment now. Let's do our questions, and we can, because we have two speakers, and they're both from the Arts and Crafts Show, and they may have some. Andrea Tavakli. Thank you. I knew I needed help with that.
Hi, how are you doing?
Hi.
Am I making a comment or am I being questioned?
You're going to give us your perspective. You serve on the advisory committee?
Yes.
If you have any insight into how you arrived at your deliberations?
So on the night that we met, we had a number of citations to deal with, or potential citations to deal with. On that night, we had David Sujic and a couple of witnesses come and present their side of the story. Jeff Kennedy did not present his side of the story, nor did he present the side of the story that he presented here tonight to us, neither via email nor by showing up. So we did not have his story along with Sujik's story. We did have a few people that heard the altercation who gave us their audio recollection of that, as Jason mentioned, and then David Sujik brought in a picture of his leg where it had been injured. Based on the information that we were presented, we unanimously agreed that this was a code of conduct violation, and that was basically it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And if we have questions, if you're going to stay a little bit, that'd be a help.
And thank you for moving this, for rearranging the schedule.
You're welcome for that. David Sukich.
Well, what Mr. Kennedy said is completely, anyway, it's just beyond belief. I got there at about 4:45, and part of the etiquette when you get down to the art show is people usually it's before like the time of 6 o'clock when the show starts, but this has been going on as far as I've been doing the art show since 1992. If in order to get the optimal space for yourself, you'll get down there at the earliest hours you possibly can, and then you'll claim you're not allowed to put it on the grass, but on the sidewalk, and not until 6 can you then put whatever you want. So I got there at 4:45, and I put my tables where I desired to be, and it was about 5:30. I saw this guy moving my tables, and I got out of my car. I said, "What are you doing?" And the guy didn't say a word, just was moving the tables. I walked over to where my tables were, and he walked towards me, and he didn't stop walking. He stuck his chest into my chest. Like I just thought, this is bizarre. And then I went to. The tables were all strewn all over the place. So I went and I was putting the tables up, and then the minute I put a table up, he'd push it aside again. So I picked the middle table up, and I held on to it, and then he obviously knew that I wasn't going to leave, I wasn't going to be intimidated by him, and he kind of scuffed and said something. I don't know what he said. He flipped the table over on it, and the leg of the table hit me in the leg. And I was just glad to see him go. That was basically it. And then apparently there were other people that had seen the same incident or something who had told Trish, and she asked if I would report it the following day. And by that time I decided I would, because there's no place day or night for him. And I didn't touch him. I intentionally avoided him. So this is ridiculous what he said. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so that...
one more thing. I just didn't want to get this. This is what concerned me, because there are other people that witnessed this thing, and I wish they would be here.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. And that concludes our public comment, but thank you for staying around if there's questions from the commission. So now we're back to questions from the commission or comments. Let's start with questions. Okay. Ms. Wiscombe.
I have a question for Mr. Kennedy. If you could come back up here, because this is a matter of public record. What you're describing is very different from what Mr. Sujik described. So I just want to know, why didn't you file a counter complaint or a complaint at the same time if you felt that Mr. Sujik was being aggressive towards you?
Because of the reason I gave you before, that I had the other involvement, and I was told that matters that occur before the show, that occur on the sidewalk, in the streets, were something that the committee, the recreation department, and the commission felt were not in the purview of these groups, and that if it happened during the show, that of course that was something that could be followed up. I asked why he didn't go to the police if he felt that this was an aggressive, threatening situation, why he didn't call the police. again, I was just simply trying to retrieve a rope that I had put out previously that he put his tables on top of, and that's reflected in his statements too. And so I didn't feel that going and complaining was the place to do it. I was told it wasn't the place. I lived through this prior situation, and it's very, even though it happened in 2007, it's very fresh in my mind that this was something that I didn't have the right to complain about, basically.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I guess this is for the woman from the Arts and Crafts Advisory Committee. You said that people came to your hearing about this that had heard the altercation, but were there any actual witnesses?
No visual witnesses.
Okay, thank you.
Or not that I know of. Let me rephrase that. None that I know.
Yeah, public comments closed now. Other comments?
Yes. I have a question. Also, I'm sorry that you just sat down. Yeah, sorry. Maybe this doesn't quite matter, but if Mr. Kennedy had been present at the meeting on the day of the violation hearing and give his side of the story, would you guys have voted differently?
I don't know. The rest of the advisory board is not here.
That's true. Would you personally have found it inconclusive?
I would have liked to have heard what everybody else had to say about his side of the story before I could make a determination.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Why he didn't go to that?
Well, yes, you may ask that question.
Okay. Mr. Kennedy, you want to step back up here, please? I guess since we're talking about the advisory committee, so why did you not go to that meeting?
I'm a caregiver, and that was my daughter's birthday that night. We had plans to go do something. And I, again, was not very comfortable going into a confrontational situation that I knew would occur at these meetings. I've been to hundreds of these meetings probably, and they can get very confrontational. And I just didn't have it in me to do that. I did submit a written response, and I had someone I had to look in on, and it was also my daughter's birthday, so I just did not want to go that night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? I'll tell you what my concern is I read through this entire packet. I read all of Mr. Kennedy's responses, and it was never mentioned in anything I read about David Sugich's aggression. I read a lot of things about what we do wrong in the Arts and Crafts Advisory Committee rules, but I didn't read any refuting of the actual story, and that concerns me. To hear a whole different side of it tonight that was not presented to the Arts and Crafts Advisory Committee, that was not written in any of our documents. Yes, you have a question?
No, I could make some comments when you're...
So that is a concern that I have. What we are dealing with here, we are the final decision-making body on this. This is a written warning. It carries no consequences if behavior is appropriate, if there are no other complaints, is the way I understand it. Is that correct?
That's
For
true.
36 months?
There's a 36-month period of which a subsequent complaint could be result in a penalty of up to 6 months. As I've told the advisory committee repeatedly, that consequences should always be proportional to the nature of the offenses.
Yeah.
But this would be the first offense on record. Also, I'd like to clarify a point on the Saturday shows. They operate differently than the Sunday shows. So on Sundays, we have space assignments. Most people know where they're going. There's a very well-established rule. Saturdays does not have space assignments. And in the past, we have in fact issued issued violations for things that happen that are directly related to the show that may be outside the show hours. An example of someone setting up, chaining a chair to a bollard and leaving it there overnight and then showing up the next morning at 9:30 expecting that was their space. So in fact, there is some history of the city, in fact, if it's directly show related, that it doesn't have to happen after 6 a.m. or after 10 a.m.
And as I understand it, the city attorney has ruled that this is in furtherance of the show. So, okay. Ms. Wiscombe.
Yeah, that was my comment. Just in Mr. Hanna's letter to Mr. Kennedy, the procedures and regulations, including the code of conduct, apply to any conduct and activity done by members and applicants in furtherance of the show. And I felt one thing that was conspicuously missing here on Mr. Kennedy's part was really any reference to the code of conduct, which is, I think, pretty basic, that you treat people with respect and, their privacy and their safety. Physical and verbal abuse will not be tolerated, and all persons shall treat public and private property and equipment with respect. And I feel that was that's kind of at the heart of what goes on here. That doesn't have a time limit. You are in the furtherance of a very long-running and successful, the longest-running non-judged arts and crafts show in the country, and it's an honor to be in it. And the compliance with the procedures and regulations go with that, and certainly the respect towards your fellow artists go with that. So I just feel it was insufficiently addressed in Mr. Kennedy's response.
Other comments? Mr. Lesnar Buxton.
Yes, I have one question. Why is there a difference between how the art show is run on Saturday versus how it's run on Sunday?
This is a historical, that's something that has been in place for many, many years, and it's something that, again, the Arts and Crafts Show members, in conjunction with the city, have defined what the rules and regulations are. And they've defined that Saturday shows do not have space assignments where Sunday shows do. One of the reasons for that are the Saturday shows are quite a bit smaller. Saturday shows are probably less than a quarter the size of a Sunday show. And when you have space assignment, someone may be all the way down towards Calle Cesar Chavez with their regular space assignment were on a Sunday, but on a Saturday you would have to walk half a mile to get of empty parkland to get to that space, and because there are such large gaps, I believe that's I wasn't there when the rule was developed, but that makes sense to me as why there is a difference of rules and regulations on those Saturday shows.
Okay.
And when we do have Saturday shows, they're related to major holidays, and we add some additional ones. For instance, in addition to recognized legal holidays, there's a fiesta show, there's the anniversary of the Arts and Crafts Show, and there have been some that we've added. We recently, the advisory committee is constantly looking at the rules and making revisions, making things clearer, hopefully improving the operation of the show. We recently had a rule that if there's a complete rain out on a Sunday, if there's no competing events the following Saturday, we will schedule a makeup show for that Saturday. If it ever rains in Santa Barbara again, we'll be able to use that. But there are there's continual review of the rules and regulations. Just this week, a revision to the coin flip rule was issued that was approved by the advisory committee and reviewed by staff and just put into effect, which will go into effect this weekend.
Thank you. And I would want us to remember here that what we're dealing with is the code of conduct violation. How the show is run, the Arts and Crafts Advisory Committee is the body that distinguishes those rules. So, okay. All right.
Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a
Okay.
motion. I think we've...
Okay, well, I would make a motion that we concur with staff's recommendation and that the commission deny the appeal of Jeff Kennedy and uphold the unanimous decision of the Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show Advisory Committee regarding the issuance of a written warning to Mr. Kennedy for violating the Code of Conduct.
Is there a second? I will second. Discussion.
I'm not in support of that motion just because I feel that there were no witnesses, and the fact that Mr. Kennedy didn't include his response any recognition of the code of conduct. Who knows what he would have said if he'd actually been in that meeting? I just think there was no witnesses, and we don't know what really happened.
Okay. All righty. Any other comments?
I think there was a. Am I correct? I thought I read in the report that there were witnesses to the verbal exchange.
Audio.
Yeah, they didn't. Didn't see it, but heard the exchange and were concerned for Mr. Sujic.
But just in response to that, they could hear what was going on, but they didn't see the behavior that precipitated the verbal exchange. So,
I understand your concern on that aspect of it, but I do believe that ample opportunity was given to hear the other side of the story, and so I can support the motion. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, 3-2. All right, that concludes this matter. Thank you all for coming. And that brings us to our capital improvement program. And this is an action item. We will be hearing it tonight and take action. Yes, and Ms. Wiscombe, we still have a quorum, but Ms. Wiscombe does need to leave.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is George Thompson. I'm the Capital Project Supervisor for the Parks and Rec Department. I'm here this evening representing the department and our project management team, presenting the 6-year capital program, FY 2018 to 2023. It's something we do every 2 years. It is both separate and part of the budget process. So you will be seeing the proposed 2-year budget that includes projects that we are proposing to build and design within the next 2 fiscal years. But today's item is looking at the longer-term 6-year program. A little bit of background about the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. It is required by the city charter, so it is every year the city administrator needs to present the CIP to the council. It really establishes our list of planned and projected capital needs. So that includes everything from buildings to program-wide replacements of simple things like picnic tables and barbecues and trash cans. It is an all-inclusive list. In developing the CIP, we look at our timeline for design, permitting, and construction. And as many of you know, Santa Barbara has a whole suite of advisory boards and commissions that review designs. We have our designs go through the Community Development Department for permitting. On top of that, we have a whole suite of regulations that we need to comply with, everything from the building code to environmental regulations. So we package all that together for each of our projects and get timelines that eventually get distributed into our CIP. Coupled with that, we look at project costs, and those really get developed through both our own internal staff experience in managing and developing projects and seeing them through construction, but we also rely on external sources as well. There's a great database for public projects that get bid and constructed, and you can actually go on there and download actual construction costs. So we utilize some of those resources as well. Coupled with that, on the other side, the revenue side, we look at grant funding and general funding and really try to match those together so that we have a realistic expectation of what projects are going to get funded and built. And despite the 6-year outlook, we really focus on that first 2 years because it coincides with our 2-year city budget. So when we're stepping back and looking at putting together the CIP, it's really a balance of funding and needs. And to put that in a nutshell, we have a lot of unmet needs. We have a whole backlog of infrastructure that needs to be maintained, replaced in some cases. We have limited resources to do that. And so looking out for the next 2 years, we're really anticipating a flat or very small growth in general fund funding for our projects. Other sources include grant funds, private donations. There are really not a lot of large pots of money that are coming in for grant funding that are identified right now. We don't have those big kind of cash cow bond measures statewide or, for example, when we're in the recession, the American Recovery Act. We don't have any of those on the horizon. So in terms of our unmet needs, as I mentioned, we've got a lot of deferred maintenance. It's an epidemic across the states. In our own city, it goes across departments, across programs. Specific for Parks and Recreation, we have a whole suite of wonderful historic buildings that are expensive to maintain and replace. We have safety issues both in our parks and in our other facilities. And we have a need to protect both the heritage and the resources that we're charged with managing. And through the development of the CIP, we do a lot of outreach through our neighborhood groups, through the commission, through, I was just last week at the Neighborhood Advisory Council. And the people that work in the department are part of the community. So we hear it from our spouses, from our kids, from our neighbors, what types of recreation and park facilities they want. The CIP, though, really looks at planning for the future. And there are a lot of considerations when we look at that. If we can get to the next slide. The future is on hold. We are stuck in the present. There we go. So planning for the future. Our department has a very outdated master plan, and so we're really looking at renovating and maintaining our existing services and facilities, preserving the heritage that I spoke about, both our historic resources and our environmental resources, but also looking into our crystal ball and anticipating future recreation trends. Many of you were involved in the pickleball experience, and that's a good example of a new recreational trend that's exploding, but also responding to changing demographics in our city. Looking at the growth of our senior population, expansion of our youth population, and how do we respond in terms of providing the facilities and recreational activities that can satisfy that demand. I spoke briefly about regulatory requirements. I won't get into it too much, but it's just something that we have to consider when developing these projects: building codes, environmental regulations, health and safety codes, particularly for our swimming pool facilities, and accessibility requirements for complying with ADA. Boy, this thing is sensitive. Okay, so for our proposed 6-year CIP, we're really looking at 38 projects that we've identified for a total of $113.4 million. Today, we're really looking at the first 2 years, so FY18 and 19. Within those 2 years, we're looking at 21 projects that some of them are design phase, some are construction. First year, 2018, $3.6 million. FY19, $4.7. And the way that we prioritize these projects in the first 2 years is looking at the feasibility of getting them done. So are they really complex projects? Some of them are, but we were really aiming for constructing them, or at least getting the design completed within that first 2 years. Overall cost, community needs, facility needs, our overall programmatic needs, both from recreational standpoint as well as our park programs. Is it an existing project? So some of these projects are carryovers from our current fiscal year that are in design, and now we're ready to go to construction. And refreshingly, some of our new endeavors. So they're really exciting to start new projects and get those moving. So I'm going to run through the projects that we're looking at over the next 2 fiscal years, starting with Alameda Plaza renovation, and these are really just in alphabetical order. This project is looking at improving the general infrastructure, everything from walkways to lighting. We have a wonderful gazebo there that needs to be either rebuilt or definitely reinforced and a lot of the components replaced. Looking at our picnic areas. This project does not include Kids World because that project is designed. We're actually in building department permit phase and looking to bid that project out within the next month. So for this project, we're looking at $100,000 to begin the design and permitting for infrastructure improvements. And that isn't until FY19. Bonet Park renovation is a project that's split into 2 phases. Again, an active project that we're designing currently with FY17 monies from the general fund. Phase 1 includes accessibility improvements, particularly looking at the existing access ramps and the stairway that's in the far northeastern corner there, closest to the playground. We're also looking at designing adult fitness equipment, similar to what we've recently installed at the Bird Refuge. Phase 2 looks at the feasibility of artificial turf. Previously in our CIP, we had a standalone artificial turf project that looked at 4 locations throughout our city. We've decided to put this into Bonet Park because this field gets a lot of use. Something needs to be done. We can't just go back in year after year and have these Band-Aid fixes. So we're looking at artificial turf as a possibility there. And that wouldn't occur in terms of installation until FY20. Several of these projects that we're talking about today are eligible for a community development block grant. Bonet Park is one, and so we'll be looking at including funding phases of this through that grant program. For FY18, we're looking at $250,000 to implement phase 1. The Cabrillo Pavilion Bathhouse renovation, again, another project that has been in our CIP and our active annual budget for quite a few years now. We are gearing up for construction in January 2018, which includes a full building and site renovation. There is a funding shortfall now, approximately $4 million, that we need to close the gap on. We've got $1 million in FY17 and former RDA bond funds to the tune of $9.3 million. The Carrillo Ballroom air conditioning, this is part of the Carrillo Recreation Center. During its recent renovation, the ballroom was not included for air conditioning, and we want to go in there next fiscal year, put in an air conditioning unit. It does get very hot in there, which limits the types of activities and rentals that can occur in there. This project would occur in 1 fiscal year, so both design and construction in FY18. We want to prioritize that so that it's online when Cabrillo Pavilion is under construction. And this is a project that we've are collaborating with Public Works Facilities on. Right now, we're both looking at our own funding requests, and we're both prioritizing this project as moving forward. Next door to the Carrillo Rec Center is the Carrillo Gym, a lovely, quaint, historic building designed by Julia Morgan. Few people know that there's a rooftop court, originally designed as, we believe, a tennis court, and more recently utilized as a basketball court. Unfortunately, it is not accessible to the public because of fire code issues and accessibility. We're looking at kicking this project off in FY19 and doing a full building renovation. And in order to do that, we really need to go in, do a building assessment, everything from structural, historic, access, as well as programmatic. Once it is renovated, what are we going to use the building for? And it will be a full building renovation that includes structural accessibility throughout the building. Dwight Murphy Ballfield renovation is another larger project that really requires a look from a bird's eye view, and that's one of the reasons why I included this photo at the bottom. There is, it has a lot of different uses currently, and there is a lot of potential for the park. The restroom facilities are underutilized. Only the left-hand portion of that block of buildings serves as a restroom facility. So we would be looking at all of the improvements that could be possible at the park, including potentially artificial turf fields. We've got a great opportunity for a fully accessible playground, which we don't have in the city. And also replacing the well-loved and well-used adult fitness equipment there. So in FY18, we would really want to move forward with some technical studies and further the concept design so that we could gear up for construction. Franceschi Park renovation is a project that has been on the dockets for quite a while. We went to City Council in recent fiscal years, got direction from them to move forward with putting together a concept plan and really putting budget numbers, realistic budget numbers towards a proposed concept plan. Right now, we've got several technical studies that are getting wrapped up. We'll be going to City Council in the next couple months to get further direction on where they want to go with Franceschi House. This project in particular is looking more at the exterior, so the park landscaping, access improvements, drainage improvements, but it would certainly be coupled with whatever direction we receive from City Council in 2017. Hale Park renovation is looking at the park as a whole again, including access and parking, habitat restoration, invasive species management, drainage and erosion control, looking at our trail system there. Also access from the north side of the park. Currently there is not access down into the park. So we're proposing $75,000 for design and permitting in FY17 to start to tackle these issues. The Louise Lowry Davis Center renovation is a current project. We were recently at HLC with the concept design. And overall, we're looking at renovating the entire interior of the building to better serve our senior population as well as the small events that rent the building. And in general, having a more effective floor plan. You can see in the bottom right corner there in that picture, a large square footage is currently utilized for office space and staff reception area. We want to look at redoing that to better serve public needs. But we also want to make a better connection to the patio and the exterior. Currently, you have to walk out the front or side doors and go around to the patio. We really want to integrate the patio as part of the building area. So we're looking at $120,000 for plans and permits in FY18 to gear up for construction. We're currently estimating $750,000 that would occur in FY19. The Municipal Tennis Center Rehabilitation Project, Ms. Zachary mentioned this in her report. We're looking at building the playground. We have currently a request for CDBG funds, and we are including a request for general funds. In March, we'll know if CDBG is moving forward, and we can adjust our budget requests there. Long term, we need to look at the stadium. Half of it has already been demolished. You can see in the lower right-hand photo there, demolished in the 1980s. It is an area that the court surface is used, but there's a lot of infrastructure there that isn't really utilized. So in FY19, we would start to tackle that issue. Off-leash dog area. Currently, we're working on a proposal at Mackenzie Park. We were just at Architectural Board of Review. Generally, they really liked the design, and the project as a whole includes fenced areas for big dogs and little dogs, as well as all of the amenities you might expect at a facility like this. We're proposing $300,000 in FY18 so that we can construct the project. Ortega Park renovation, this is another master plan approach. So we've got a lot of facilities there that are in need of upgrades, including the swimming pool. We're looking at the possibility of including a splash pad or a splash playground there. We're looking at the pool and community building as a complex. So how would they serve each other and what uses could be served there? Another great location potentially for artificial turf fields. The fields currently get a lot of use. You have probably seen that they're currently being renovated, just the natural turf fields. Looking again at our picnic and restroom facilities, and this ties into a lot of our safety issues that we've been dealing with. Parking, in terms of neighborhood parking, there's not a lot, so that is an issue that we would have to look at as well. We're proposing FY18 $75,000 to really begin scoping any technical studies that we need to undertake. And of course, as part of this effort, it would include a large community outreach component. And then FY19 move more into the putting pen to paper and moving with design and permitting. This project, the Park Infrastructure Safety Program, is a general program that provides replacement funds for all of the things that we take for granted when we go to our parks. Picnic tables, benches, trash cans, barbecues. These are small items, but just the sheer numbers that we have add up to a large dollar amount. It also includes fencing, lighting, pathways, signage, as well as things that we don't see that are vitally important. Pipes that provide water, conduit that provides electricity. All those things eventually need to be replaced. And we're proposing $100,000 in FY19 to do that, and then from there on out, every other year, $100,000. The park irrigation system renovation, most of our irrigation systems are over 30 years old. Obviously, with the drought, there is an added focus on how efficient we're watering our areas, both our lawn, turf areas, and our landscape planters. There's been a lot of developments in the irrigation technology over the years, so we want to take advantage of those. Replacement and upgrades may include pipelines, sprinklers, but also control systems such as valves, software, and sensors. And we're looking at FY19, $150,000, and we're proposing those improvements go towards Pershing Ball Field. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan, this has been on our CIP for a number of years, and it really is a critical need for our department, not as a planning document, but as a working document, something that really guides our work and taps the community to assess what our community needs are, looks at our city's infrastructure, but also our county's infrastructure. So we don't want to duplicate efforts. This really takes a comprehensive approach to it. And so in FY19, we're proposing $150,000 to start some of those assessments, start some of the community outreach, so that eventually we can get a master plan. The playground replacement program, this is something that we do every year. Most of our playgrounds are on a 10-year replacement schedule. We look at issues such as safety, accessibility, aesthetics. The playground industry as a whole has a lot of design innovation right now, new products, new designs. In FY18, we're looking at $150,000 for Mackenzie Park, and then FY19, $180,000 for Ortega. It may be coupled with our master plan effort there, but for Ortega in particular, it is eligible for CDBG, and we have capitalized on that grant source for this program. Plaza Veracruz renovation, we really want to look at what possibilities there are at Plaza Veracruz for increasing active recreation. And this is just a list of potential recreational opportunities at Plaza Veracruz. So in FY19, we're proposing $75,000 to begin concept design, getting some more technical data on the park landscape and footprint, and start concept plans, as well as community outreach. Thousand Steps renovation. We just received our draft historic evaluation and our land survey. This is to really renovate portions of Thousand Steps on the Mesa. And right now we're working through contracting for civil and geotechnical engineering. We have currently about $200,000 in FY17 to move forward with concept designs. We're proposing FY18, $100,000 to complete construction plans and move forward with permitting to really align us for construction in FY19. The trails and walkways, this is another kind of programmatic approach to both our open space and urban parks. We have both our recreational trails, unimproved trails, as well as our more urban park areas that have more of a built infrastructure. All of these trails require some level of design and maintenance. And so this program looks at $100,000 in FY19 to develop new trails and walkways, but also propose standards and increased management of existing trails and walkways. The Urban Forest Management Plan, we're proposing to update the city's street tree master plan, develop a park tree master plan, and also include specific projects where we can start to renovate some of our parkways, respond to drought issues, and enact our drought action plan. We're looking at FY19, $150,000. The West Beach Aquatic Facility, this is a photo of the wading pool, which unfortunately is currently closed for a number of reasons, but one of the big ones is there is a leak in the pool that would require significant investment to repair. We would have to rip up a lot of the pool decking. When we're faced with those sorts of repair costs, we need to step back and evaluate what is the best use of our money. And we want to look at the possibility of a splash playground. So this reduces our staffing costs because we don't have to have a lifeguard. There's not standing water at one of these facilities. It's more the fountain type splash playground. But we also want to look at future improvements. So we don't want to design and construct something that's going to limit the future possible uses of Los Baños, which may include a 25-yard warm water lap pool that could also serve as a teaching facility for people learning how to swim, not just our younger generation. We also need to look at restroom facilities because there are certain health codes that may require additional restroom facilities. And we want to not preclude the expansion of Los Baños to an Olympic-sized facility, a 50-meter by 25-meter pool. In FY19, we're looking at $125,000. And really, that's directed towards moving that splash playground concept forward so that we can reopen this facility. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Sewell, our business manager now. He oversees our golf projects.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I'm sensitive to time, so we're going to keep going through this presentation. For our new commissioners, this sounds all really wonderful and cool. And I just... we come up with recommendations, and it's through the budget process what we actually fund gets pared down. And essentially, some of the things you see now are things that we've had for a long time. Some things had funding, and then the funding was eliminated, and now we're still recommending that they're important projects. So just to give you a sense,
I will say,
unlikely we'll get more than $3 million in funding in the next fiscal year, but we keep our hopes up.
And I will say that West Beach Aquatic Facility was the first thing on the agenda on my first meeting 20 years ago. So,
all right. Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I am Mark Sewell. I'm the Parks and Recreation Business Manager, and I have the Golf CIP. I had prepared a 2-hour presentation, but I figure that I might see if I can do the abridged version for you. So firstly, the Parks Recreation has a number of funds. It has the general fund, which George Thompson has just sort of taken you through, and then we have the golf fund. So the items that I'm going to talk about, it's only about 4 or 5 slides. They are funded by revenues in the golf club. That's how it works at the golf club. All the revenues that are generated through green fees and sales of merchandise and all that like are able to be reinvested into the golf course as long as we're making a profit. And so the improvements that you'll see have been determined in consultation with the new management company, who's now been with us for 6 months. The Golf Advisory Committee has seen this plan and they've unanimously endorsed it. And of course, we do have a golf course safety master plan that all of our improvements are measured against to make sure that we are moving forward towards creating a more and more safe golf course. So we're looking at a plan for $365,000 in FY18 and $367,000 in FY19, and confidence is high that that will be able to be fully funded with revenues, as I mentioned. So firstly, the drought is clearly a huge issue for Southern California, and we are at the heart of it. And so, we recognise at the golf course that we are, for many, a green island in a brown city. And I want to just be very clear that 90% of the water that we use is recycled, and we're looking to see if we can even increase that as a percentage of the water that is used at the golf club. We do that by retrofitting our sprinklers and looking to try to maximise the areas of the golf course where we use recycled water. We have to use potable water on the greens, otherwise we run the risk of killing all of the grass on the greens, and the greens are the main asset. The funding proposed is $185,000 in FY18 and $55,000 in 19. We actually have a significant chunk of money in this fiscal year that we're looking to do as well, so it represents a significant portion of our budget in the next 3 years. We are taking it very, very seriously. Green and tee renovation, I just mentioned the greens. They are the main asset for the golf course. Golfers will kill, or they will grow your reputation of your golf course by the quality of the greens. And so we take that very, very seriously. They require the most maintenance. They are the most difficult part of the golf course to keep good. And occasionally they require to be renovated. Many of our tees, where they are on par threes, they take a lot of beating. We have a lot of rounds. We are the busiest golf course in the area, and that takes its toll on some of those areas. So they have to be resodded. And, you can see there is a modest amount in FY18. That's just a couple of tee boxes we're looking to do. And in FY19, we put some money in there. We may need to rebuild one of our greens. However, there is some confidence that Courseco's new cultural practices might be able to extend the life of it. And so we'll take a watching brief on that. We need equipment to be able to maintain the golf course. All of the equipment is owned by the Golf Fund. It's not the general fund's equipment, it's all the Golf Fund's equipment. We are responsible for maintaining and repurchasing that equipment, significant investment in that. And we need to recognise that, we want to try and make sure we've got money in the budget to be able to replace key equipment as it goes beyond its useful life for maintenance. So there's $30,000 a year in there for FY18 and 19. And then infrastructure. Some of this isn't very sexy, but it's absolutely essential. And over the last 10, 15 years at the golf course, it has been delayed because there hasn't been the money to be able to actually go and address it. And only the very, very highest priority things have been able to be dealt with. So now we're able to forecast and be confident to forecast to be able to spend money on improving the driving range, which we know has some challenges, improving the accessibility on the golf course as well. We do have partnerships with Cottage Hospital, whereby we provide teaching services to people who need extra support. And we want to make it the golf course easier for them as well to be able to get out there and enjoy. We have service roads, which the asphalt is falling apart, and we need to get onto those things. And, of course, restrooms are a perennial maintenance requirement. So we've got $79,000 and $100,000 planned in the next couple of years to address those. And then finally, the Players Improvement Fund. This was mentioned earlier in the interviews for the Golf Advisory Committee. It's a program that's pretty unique in this area. This is something where $1 for every green fee, so it's around $60,000 a year, goes into a fund that the players have an influence over how it's spent. They can email me, they can speak to members of the Golf Advisory Committee or the Players Improvement Fund Committee, and those ideas for projects get discussed, voted on, verified, and ultimately if staff agree that it's the right thing for the golf course, they happen. And there are some good projects we've managed to do over the last couple of years, and we want to continue that going forward. And we look for exciting things which the players will actually get to see the benefit of. This isn't about replacing asphalt and all the things that are needed. This is about things the golfers will really see. And that's it for the Golf Fund.
Ending on a note with money to fund things. That's always good.
Okay, so this evening we're looking for an action for overall commission recommendation to Planning Commission and City Council on our department's overall approach for the CIP. And for projects proposed for FY 18-19, we will, as Ms. Zachary mentioned, have the opportunity to come back before the commission to look at the budget proposed for FY 18-19. And so we're just looking at really these preliminary project priorities, not necessarily the specific dollar amounts right now. So next steps, staff will really finalize all of the details in the CIP. We're anticipating January 2017, I believe it's the 19th, January 19th, to be before Planning Commission. And then it goes to Finance Committee in March, April, and eventually to City Council. And then in May, Parks and Rec Commission will have the opportunity to look at the budget. And finally, the 2-year plan and the FY 18 budget will get adopted by City Council in June.
Thank you. Questions? Do any of the commission members have questions? It's a lot of overwhelming information at one time, but I know that Commissioner Lesnar Buxton and I looked at this last week, so we had that advantage. I would just say always our priorities are, as staff has mentioned, safety, maintaining what we have. Safety also, I think, goes along with accessibility and the ability for some of these programs to be in the queue for grant funding, because that's a big, important part of how things happen in the city. The reality is we will never get the funds to do all these projects, and I think I admire that staff just keeps plugging. Thank you. Thank you for keeping us moving forward on it. But things like the Carrillo Ballroom air conditioning, we're going to have one of our major revenue sources go down for a couple of years, and it would be lovely to have a big enough venue to direct people to and keep them in renting from us, is how I look at it. Dwight Murphy Ball Field, it's sort of hidden away unless you're over there at the zoo, but it is a very active place. Every time you go by, there's a lot of people there, and a lot of our parks are really showing their wear. So I see this as all necessary things. I'm happy to see the infrastructure, safety, and the irrigation. I think they belong in the budget the same way that the playground projects do, that we just set money aside every year to do what we need to do. And I'm glad to see that in the budget. So I can wholeheartedly support both the general fund projects and the golf projects.
I'd like to, if there's no further discussion, can I make a motion?
You may make a motion.
Okay.
Wait a minute. I think
Chair Longstreet, Commissioner Martinez going, we actually do want you to include in your motion, if you look at the first page of your staff report, and you do, excellent, because we would like the commission to make its recommendations so that it can be forwarded to the Planning Commission and Council as part of their consideration.
And I think you have our support.
Yes, definitely. So I would like to make the motion that we approve the CIP, the overall FY 2018-2023 Capital Improvement Program be forwarded to the Planning Commission and City Council.
And do we need to add those other two bullets to the motion?
Do you want me to say something about this?
And that projects proposed for FY 2018 and 2019, preliminary project priorities based on funding.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. And thank you. This is what keeps everything going.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, another thought, we talked about it at the beginning of the meeting when we get fully commissioned up with all our commissioners in January, the desire to do some site visits. It's been a number of years since we did a bus tour, and I think perhaps Commissioner Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Wiscombe were on the last one.
Oh, yes. I know.
So one of the things
Never
we
miss a
can
bus
also
trip.
talk about for the sites that the commission is less familiar with and that we're proposing as part of CIP, that we include those so you get the sense of where they're located, and then in it's actually, you will see the budget first in April and again in May if necessary. You can make recommendations in terms of priorities at that time as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that concludes our business for tonight. So our meeting will stand adjourned, and I wish everybody happy holidays. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.